যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. I hope the audio is coming fine. It is, right? Yeah, it is. We are going to basically discuss first and mainly the main priority of today is to discuss a research paper written in the year 2000 by famous, almost legendary historian Dr. Kunal Chakrabarti of JNU. It was sent to me by the usual culprit, academic man, of course, and I have no idea what path it takes. I did not go through it. I did not check out its in conclusion and stuff. I wanted to essentially react to it with a fresh mind. So I have no idea if it has leftist propaganda or right-wing propaganda or simply truth which people mistake for right-wing / left-wing propaganda, like some people in the film reviewing circuit. But I am very distracted with today's live stream. So let me just get through those reasons first, why I'm distracted. Firstly, today I went to the local court pretty early in the morning, early for me, not for other Indians, because another significant step progressed, and then I got to know one of my very close friends. He used to be my best friend at one point. Even right now, he is one of my closer friends from childhood, and we meet every now and then in some friends gathering, hangout, etc. Durga Pujas, some friend's birthday, or some friend has come back to Kolkata for a few days or will leave Kolkata. So on all those occasions, I see him. He had a heart attack, and he is 1 year younger than me. And so I'm now officially at that age where my friends are having heart attacks, though I should not be. 33 is not an age for a heart attack, but that's how people's lifestyles are today. And there's something I have been thinking about for the last 7-8 years. I've started saying it directly to my friends' faces in the last one year, and I've talked about it once or twice from my channel directly in the last 1.5 years, which is an extremely dark thing to say. But if you do care about somebody, you have to say these things, which is forget TFR, health, saving culture, etc., and saving the great BBK culture of Kolkata, etc. 90s born kids, especially the 90s kids, most BBKs who are born in the 90s, especially the women, will start dying off in the 2030s, because most BBKs have extremely poor health. Women have even worse health for two reasons. Because in general, the tilt towards validation, from what things women feel validated, or what things validate a woman. Upbringing also matters to a large extent, of course. How your parents validated you as a kid, etc. So the validation systems for women are usually extremely screwed up. So a lot of them find validation in calling themselves foodie after the body positivity movement, which has only done bad things for the world. Although people used to feel an obsession to become skinny like petite white women, so now people feel an obsession to look like uh, athlete black women, but people are going to still copy other people. So body positivity movement in that sense has not helped nor created a bad situation really, but definitely some people who would not have become fat would have done something about it, um, not out of shame. Shame doesn't help you in these situations, but some people who would at least consider themselves to be unhealthy, even if the people didn't shame them, people would definitely call them mota every once in a while in a friendly bantery way. But a lot of people who would have sorted out their health absolutely have not, simply because of the body positivity movement. So yes, you can say the body positivity movement has definitely increased the sales of medicines and food and made people worse in health, and definitely has killed a bunch of people, because a lot of people have gotten heart attacks simply because they did not lose any weight, or didn't get fit at all, just because they thought that's what body positivity is all about. And so women, bbk women, who think they can get away with it by declaring themselves to be chubby and curvy, etc., even though for curves you need some angles and stuff. If you're a perfect circle, I don't know where the curve lies, but that's how body positivity movements geometry works. So all these people will be dying off when they're 42, and with maybe the vaccine, I have no clue, I'm not too sure about it. I did pester my parents to take the vaccines as soon as possible. I did not touch it with a 10 feet pole. So I don't know, heart attacks seem to have risen amongst young people now. One other reason might be not vaccines, or maybe vaccines, but one reason might be that our bodies are not capable of handling this much food. See, whenever any populace or any group of people from any particular region who are not used to having a particular kind of food, let's say who are used to having only very less amounts of food or very less calorie foods, when they do start having high calorie foods or a lot of food, their bodies get screwed up. It absolutely happens all the time, which is why most of the obesity today is in the Polynesian islands, or the Micronesian, Austronesian, those island nations. Okay, because their bodies are have evolved to store a lot of fat. So because they lived on semi uninhabited islands only, they were the ones inhabiting, not much crops, etc. So when they finally see globalization and see KFC, Starbucks, and McDonald's in their islands, and they become tourist hotspots, all of them become obese immediately. So it would not be uh, too much of an extrapolation to deduce that something of that sort might have happened to Indians as well, especially our generations, who are the first in a long time to get a lot of food, and a lot of healthy food, in about 800-900 years, especially Bengalis after a lot of famine, and especially with the bad health of BBKs and bad lifestyles, lack of physical activities of BBKs, etc. So um, rest assured, 2030s is going to be a bloodbath for the 90s kids, especially if they are Bengali, especially if they are women, especially if they are Brahmin, Vaidya, or Kayastha. So that's where we are. This friend of mine, very good friend, uh, plays video games a lot, is not extremely fat by any standard. Even if, like, even when we were growing up, if even when it was okay to call people fat, you wouldn't call him fat. But how much your arteries are choked with fat, you will never know from the outside. That depends on overall body structure, muscle quantity, muscle mass, bone density, all of that. So you would not call him fat, but he's had a heart attack. He's had a heart attack today, and he likes to play video games a lot. So he doesn't work out. Eats a lot of fast food and plays video games a lot. And video games, you sit at one spot for more than 45 minutes to 1 hour. All your blood in the entire body is not really circulating too much anymore, because it's all of it is stuck in your butt. All your upper body is fixed like this. The entire weight of the upper body is on the butt. So blood doesn't go down, it doesn't come up, return to your heart. And so, which is why you should not sit at one spot for too long. And he does that mainly. He mainly plays video games a lot, and he has all cool setups and stuff. You can talk to other people with whom you are playing, with against whom you are playing, etc. So he's properly a gamer. And the phone call from another mutual friend was almost surreal. I couldn't believe my ears. It's such a weird conversation to have, that our friend has had a heart attack. And YouTube is demonetizing my videos for about even one or two abusive words, so I'll have to take it up as a challenge to get through this live stream without a single abusive word. But a lot of some kinds of people still believe bodybuilding is equal to fitness, and then people wonder why bodybuilders are dying right now, even though bodybuilders have forever died. An average life expectancy of a bodybuilder is 42 years. During COVID, I had an insane debate with a girl, with a BBK girl. I was, of course, posting against vaccine mandates and stuff. So, and I was talking about, I was speaking out against lockdowns as well. So she said that, no, it's extremely serious. How can you say like this, etc. I said, yeah, very serious. Why aren't any athletes dying? How serious is this disease? Not a single athlete from a single sport dies. What kind of a vicious viral disease is this? So she said, no, some wrestlers died as well. So I lost my mind, because I used to follow wrestling ardently at that point. So I said, what? I follow Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, cricket, football, MotoGP, UFC, MMA, and a lot of wrestling, of course. Proper kushti, not WWE. So who has died? Which wrestler? Which country? She then said, "Oh no. I meant some bodybuilder, but he's also very fit." So I also told her that, okay, if you mean WWE, then yes, it's possible that the guy died because of steroids and stuff. And then she showed the picture of some bodybuilder, and then I googled stuff, found one article with the names of 20 athletes who have died, a total of 20 athletes in the entire world, 19 of whom were retired in their 60s and 70s. उसके लिए हेडलाइन बनाया कि ये क्रिकेटर मर गया, ये फुटबॉलर मर गया कोविड से, सब कोविड में मर गए 60 की उम्र में, 70 की उम्र में. गाली ना दे के कैसे चला है लाइव स्ट्रीम. So one guy died who was in his early 20s, must have been born with some genetic defects, some birth defects. Maybe his mother had 10 kids before him, or maybe had 50 miscarriages before having him. With those situations, you can have problems. A sister of mine, a cousin sister of mine, died that way. Used to work out, actually. Was in her early 40s. Died simply because her mother had countless miscarriages before having her. And she was born when her mother was pretty old. Bangla gali bhuj bane. Yes, I was planning to do that, yes. But I'm taking this up as a challenge as well. So, bhai, that girl says, yes, bodybuilders are so fit. Why are they dying? So I again told her as well that bodybuilders have always been dying. What's new with this COVID thing? And let me tell you guys why exactly bodybuilders die, among other things. One of the main reasons is, since they take so much testosterone replacement therapy. See, men and women both have testosterone and estrogen, okay? Men have more testosterone, less estrogen. Women have more estrogen, less testosterone. So when you take testosterone, proportionately the estrogen also increases. And when estrogen increases, your body doesn't have that great definition that is expected out of you in bodybuilding competitions, and lower abdomen fat, etc. So parallelly, you have to take estrogen blockers. When you take estrogen blockers, your heart, lungs, all of them dry up basically. They are supposed to be in a wet, slippery atmosphere situation, right? Which is ensured by the estrogen. And bodybuilders and even any athlete who takes steroids or testosterone usually takes estrogen blockers as well. If you do estrogen blockers a little too much, maybe the guy suggesting you or guiding you is not that educated. Maybe it's a screw up. Maybe one day, maybe your body was not meant to accept it anyway, and you didn't even know. Maybe your best educated guide even didn't know. It's not always possible to know. Perhaps people make mistakes. Then you will die, and that's how bodybuilders keep dying. And bodybuilders are not fit. I saw one extremely significant Indian Hindu right wing Twitter influencer say this. So I was very triggered. He said that, oh my God, even bodybuilders are dying. What is with this heart attack pandemic? How can this happen? How can bodybuilders also die? They are the first ones you expect to die because they have the least healthy internal body. Okay. So, guys, in conclusion of this topic, start working out as soon as possible. And if you like to eat and stuff, you're not going to make it beyond late 30s. I used to tell all my close friends, especially my friends who have had kids, that the way you are leading your life, you'll die at 42. But now it seems the time is much closer because our bodies are not trained or not used to for hundreds of years to eat so much food and so much high nutrition, high calorie foods. You will probably die in your late 30s or early 40s if you don't take up fitness immediately. And by fitness I don't mean bodybuilding. Okay. सिर्फ एक डंबल उठा के बाइसेप कर्ल करने से तुम्हारा कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. द बिगेस्ट मार्कर ऑफ योर फिटनेस जर्नी is whether you get sick easily or not. If you are a bodybuilder and if you get sick after getting drenched in the rain for 5 minutes, your workouts are not doing you any good. Okay. Second thing is, just found out that a friend of mine has been in lockup for about 8-10 days. He was we had no way to contact him, and we had no contacts with his parents as well, because he's not like a childhood friend. He's a sort of a work colleague who's turned out to be a nice friend. And that's happened because his girlfriend has filed fake cases because of a breakup. Lol. So I was dealing with that and calling up a bunch of lawyers and talking to his brother and stuff. Let's see how that pans out. Now we will discuss a paper which allegedly, according to Academic Man at least, explains the procedure of that cultural fusion that Kantara chapter 1 has shown, of how different pre-Vedic religions got fused with a Vedic religion and created something new. Why jailed? Because of his dumbass lawyer, on whom they have some trust for now, but I am not being able to convince them as of yet that his lawyer is extremely bad. His bail has been rejected. Professional bodybuilding is just an unhealthy beauty competition. Just unhealthy is too polite a phrase. I would say it's an extremely evil thing. They engineer body through diets enormously, not always drugs or steroids. Who Historia de Gora? Bodybuilders. Really? Don't challenge me on this. I don't challenge you guys on theology and Bengal history. Don't challenge me on this. Okay, let's cast the paper on the screen. Yeah, don't challenge me on fitness and films. Okay. कि किसी ने अभी एक यूट्यूब चैनल खोल के रखा है, फिल्म का थोड़ा बहुत रिव्यू करता है, तो ऑफिशियली उसका कोई एक्सपर्टीज नहीं बन जाता है. अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल हिलेरियसली वर टेलिंग मी दैट नो, स्टे इन योर लेन, डिस्कस व्हाट यू डिस्कस, दैट्स योर स्ट्रांग पॉइंट, डोंट लेक्चर दैट गाय ऑन फिल्म्स, ही इज अ फिल्म रिव्यूअर. ऐसा लग रहा है कि कोई ऑफिशियल कोई उपाधि भगवान उसके ऊपर ही थोपा है, मेरे ऊपर नहीं थोपा. And then people are saying you have no idea how many films he has watched, etc. उसने चैनल शुरू करने के बाद जितना फिल्में देखे होंगे उससे ज्यादा बार मैं सांस लेता हूं दिन में भाई. उससे ज्यादा मैं, एक्चुअली उल्टा है, मैंने जितने फिल्में देखे उससे कम बार वो दिन में सांस लेता होगा. So just because I discuss sociology out of hobby doesn't mean I have no clue of films. That's almost my main field. People forget that. Okay. So the paper is called, the journal is called Studies in History, I guess, from Sage. The paper is called Cult Region. The Puranas and the Making of the Cultural Territory of Bengal. Kunal Chakrabarti. JNU के लिए ही था पेपर. For a long time, South Asia has been viewed as a single cultural area. This holistic approach is now at a discount, and the so called mill run history is increasingly receiving greater attention from historians and social anthropologists alike. In a sharp critique of cultural holism in the anthropology of South Asia, John Leavitt has argued recently that such an approach seeks to explain the variety of data available from different parts of India in terms of a relatively small and simple set of underlying cultural or ideological patterns. While Robert Redfield's model of great and little traditions freezes and perpetuates the view of the 19th century British observers that Indian culture consists of an ideal, typical, real pan Indian civilization and a number of survivals from earlier locally represented and semi civilized stages, Louis Dumont replaces this dualism with a monism which claims that the two traditions are no more different than a general idea and the local working out of that idea. This conception elaborated, actually, here a lot of right wingers would probably agree with Dumont. This conception, elaborated by Mackem Marriott, among others, tends to reduce all particularities in Indian cultural traditions to just variations of a broader pattern, which, quote unquote, radically underestimates the reality and importance of a regional and historical specificity in South Asia. It should be mentioned that even though I sympathize with Leavitt's critique of the pan-Indian Brahmanical model, which often disregards the particularity of regional traditions, the role of Brahmanism in the making of these regional cultures cannot be ignored. Hence the unity, the tying together of different threads and making a cloth out of it. While it is obvious that each regional tradition must be endowed with unique cultural characteristics to distinguish it from other similar traditions, I argue that the common factor of Brahmanical presence in different degrees in each of these does not necessarily undermine their uniqueness. Indeed, I will go a little further and assert that it was as a result of the Brahmanical intervention, especially in peripheral areas such as Bengal, that clusters of fragmented but interrelated indigenous local cultures could converge on a common core and acquire a wider identity, which both included and transcended the local specificities. Beautifully said. In other words, and actually, the massive film buff would actually say this is leftist propaganda, I guess. In other words, it is not so much in content as in agency that I acknowledge the role of Brahmanism in the formation of regional traditions in India. Leavitt's critique does not take into account the heuristic value of the generalizations of such scholars as Redfield. Social scientists' interest in the question of the formation of regional identity based on a set of specific cultural characteristics is therefore of comparatively recent origin. Predictably, there is no consensus on the definition of a region. After examining 40 such definitions, Bougeot-Garnier, for example, was able to detect only one point of unanimity among them, which is a region is a spatial unit. What is the definition of a region? That's the question here. So a region is a spatial unit distinct from the space that surrounds it. This fundamental and rather obvious constituent of a region is of little use to me, for I am concerned with the process of how the socially bound space designated Bengal, corresponding roughly to the present West Bengal and Bangladesh, came to acquire the distinctive characteristics that mark it off as a cultural unit at a certain level of generalization. The expression cultural unit also requires some clarification. Without getting into the controversy on yet another definition, let me state simply that by culture here, I understand a persistent arrangement of those aspects of material conditions, social organization, language, religious systems, behavioral patterns, symbolic codes, moral visions, and interpretive practices which a group of people share in common. Identity, on the other hand, is largely a mental construct. It is a consciousness of participating in a culture which endows a group of people with a sense of belonging to a community. So you participate in it, and in return, you get that. This consciousness is elusive and unquantifiable because the recognition of a common culture is often implicit. Obviously, I'm speaking not of that assertive identity hastily forged in response to a perceived threat or contemporary aspiration, but of a popular awareness developed inexorably, but almost imperceptibly over the centuries through a process of natural selection of intrinsic and fundamental elements in the culture, recognized by people all over the region, inherently, remember. If identity is the self-description of a person or a group which outlines defining characteristics, this description was seldom articulated in pre-modern times. Identity formation, therefore, refers to a process occurring over a period of time under a given set of conditions. The processual aspect needs to be emphasized because I will be looking at the Brahmanical initiative in recognizing the social structure and particularly the religious mores of the indigenous people of Bengal through the codification of a set of texts called the Upapuranas during the early medieval period, which may be considered to be the first systematic attempt to create a cultural tradition in Bengal transcending purely local boundaries. The corpus of literature called the Puranas was composed with a view to revitalizing the Brahmanical social order, which was undermined seriously during the early centuries of the Christian era by the widespread popularity of Buddhism, the beliefs and practices of Tantra, and such other factors. The Brahmanas perceived that it was necessary to widen the social base of Brahmanism in order to meet this challenge. They therefore attempted to draw people from the non-Brahmanical fold into their sphere of influence and earn their trust in Brahmanical leadership. The result was the creation of a composite syncretic religious system, which incorporated diverse rituals and beliefs without endangering the social supremacy of the Brahmanas. तुम भी रहो हम भी रहे यहाँ पे अगर सोशल सुप्रीमेसी ऑफ द ब्राह्मणास बोला जा रहा है यहाँ पे एक प्रॉब्लम है क्योंकि जो लोग फैमिली बेसिस पे ब्राह्मण बने हुए थे अकेले वो ब्राह्मण नहीं रह जाते हैं ब्राह्मण नाम का जो पोस्ट है वो पोस्ट का सुप्रीमेसी रह जाता है यहाँ पे अगर कोई कौमी प्रोपागेंडा से किसी को पढ़ा रहा है या फिर कोई कौमी पढ़ रहा है इसको उसको लगेगा कि अच्छा देखो कितने हरामी थे ब्राह्मण अपना सुपीरियोरिटी नहीं छोड़ा मगर यहाँ पे 2 लाइन पहले ही स्पेसिफाई कर दिया गया है कि अलग लोग भी घुस रहे थे उस सिस्टम में तो यहाँ पे कोई फॉर्मली इंडिजिनस ब्लड वाला आदमी भी ब्राह्मण बन सकता है वो यहाँ पे क्लियर है therefore I have no problem in appreciating this situation where the social supremacy of the Brahmins are being maintained because anyone could be a Brahmin so social supremacy of the post of the Brahmin is being maintained. That would be like saying that no matter what happens the post of the prime minister is going on. Which is why a person like Mamata Banerjee, who looks like Mamata Banerjee, is also a Brahmin in Bengal. From her features, you can tell she's obviously from a pre-Vedic heritage. Thus, the Puranas evolved out of an interaction between the Brahmanical tradition and many local traditions. मैंने कॉफी लाया है खाना ही पीना ही भूल गया अभी तक 1 मिनट थोड़ा 2 मिनट कमेंट्स देखते हैं तो 2 सिप कॉफी पी लेने दो Kantara was clearly against this narrative, no? Was it? Kantara also showed that they went hand in hand, or that it was about to become hand in hand because, right, in the Brahma Kalasha song, it all comes together, and that coming together is what is being discussed here. Netizen, yes, Brahmanism swallowed local deities. The word swallowed comes with some baggage and connotations. So if the implication is that it was a bad thing to have happened or how evil it was that it swallowed all religions, then I'm not in favor of it. But yes, it got fused. I wouldn't use the word swallowed here. कॉफी छोड़ दी लेकिन मेरा स्लीप साइकिल जो है उसके बाद मैं आज सुबह कोर्ट गया इसलिए कॉफी फ्यूजन माइट बी अ बेटर वर्ड यस सिंक्रेटिक कल्चर वल्चर भी इस पेपर में ही बोला जा रहा है कोऑप्टेड no cooperated is too pointlessly negative a word although since I'm not an hedonist I would probably admit that a lot of competition fierce competition initial bawal all of that was definitely there ऐसा नहीं है कि रैंडम कोई प्रीवेदिक आदमी एक या फिर एक ट्राइब बैठ के पूजा कर रहा है अचानक एक दिन 2 ब्राह्मण आए बोले कि आज से चलो तुम्हारा देवता मेरा देवता और हाँ हो गया अगले दिन ही सब एकदम फ्यूजन हो गया तो if I was that then I would be reviewing movies like the Ankit Shah film reviews but so I believe there might have been some conflict but it was definitely resolved and the end result is what we see today but the fact that it was resolved is where we must focus as let's say people who are proud of this nation and this culture this land our point of pride or glory is this, that instead of destroying them, we became one with them. That's the point. It didn't swallow Sringeri Peetham visited Nappa Panjuli temple in Dharmasthala today. Syncretism, yes. भाई मैंने कांतारा देखा, वो भी तेरे फेवरेट रिव्यूअर को देख के, स्टिल कोई प्रोपागेंडा नहीं। अरे हमारे आंखों में प्रॉब्लम है, हमको नहीं दिखता। इतना प्रोपागेंडा स्ट्रांग हुआ है कि हमको किसी को लेफ्टिस्ट प्रोपागेंडा दिख नहीं रहा है, ठीक है। ये हमारी ब्रेन की गलती है। दादा, व्हाट इज बंगाल एक्चुअल कल्चरल हेरिटेज दैट कैन टाई अस टू दिस लैंड? द बंगाल रेनेसां डजंट इवोक सम इमोशंस? भाई, नियॉन, फॉर डिफरेंट पीपल इट माइट बी डिफरेंट। ऐसे बोलने को तो मैं बोल सकता हूँ कि यस, द ग्रेट रिलीजियस हिस्ट्री ऑफ places like Bakura or something like that. But frankly, you have to look for what makes you tick as a person, no, and look for those things in your in the history of your land. If you find those things, if you are personally proud of a lot of things, then you can say that you feel tied to this land and its heritage. So I don't have that much of a problem with Renaissance, because when Renaissance was happening, when Brahmo Samaj was happening, all of that was happening in a particular context where things were extremely screwed up. And these days, I, in fact, a little more proudly say good things about Brahmo Samaj, because I noticed in Veer Savarkar's writing after writing after writing that he has nothing but compliments to say, compliments to give about Brahmo Samaj as well as Raja Ram Mohan Roy. So I'm not on board with the other right wingers who will only blindly hate Raja Ram Mohan Roy anymore. I admit that Raja Ram Mohan Roy has definitely said some things and done some things which are very weird and creepy, probably downright evil, but he definitely had another side, and I definitely know this, that Veer Savarkar also definitely knew of those quote unquote evil actions. Okay, if he can talk highly of him, I can. Um, he repeatedly calls Brahmo Samaj a Hindu Sangatanist movement. And the other thing is that what else can you be proud of in Bengal? I am very proud of Bengal's wrestling culture, especially which was done even by the post-Renaissance people in Anushilan Samaj and stuff. So I feel connected with that history. And now though, because of Tantra as well. So all of that makes me feel that, yes, I have some liking, some interests, some things that make me take some things that get me charged up, even without me consciously going after it or looking out for it, which were either inherently Bengali or always existed here or were created here. So that's how I'm connected to Bengal. Sher, great question. This needs to be answered. Sher is asking, Ajit Eketike and Ankur ne bahut roast kiya, but seriously though, disagreeing with his review, we are one community. Why so much fighting amongst us for a movie? The blame lies on him. He started saying कि किसी को समझ में नहीं आ रहा है क्यों, सिर्फ उसको अकेले समझ में क्यों आ रहा है, ये प्रश्न उसका ही था। उसने ही बोला कि मैं अब सबको ब्लॉक कर दे रहा हूँ, किसी को मेरा आर्ग्यूमेंट पसंद नहीं आया, मैंने कितने फिल्मों को फ्लॉप कराया है, अब इसको फ्लॉप नहीं करवा पा रहा हूँ, इसलिए आई एम गोइंग टू थ्रो अ टेंट्रम। तो वो बोलने के बाद तो एनफ रोस्टिंग जायज़ है। और उनके व्यूअर्स ने तो भाई सब, तो वो ट्रोल आर्मी बोलते हैं, मैं ट्रोल आर्मी वर्ड नहीं यूज़ करना चाहता था, क्योंकि ठीक है, चलो ऐसा कुछ हो सकता है कि किसी दिन मेरे लिए भी मेरे व्यूअर्स जाके किसी और के चैनल पे जाके आर्ग्यू करेंगे, मेरा साइड ऑफ द आर्ग्यूमेंट देंगे, तो उसको डायरेक्टली ट्रोल आर्मी बोलना ठीक नहीं है। मगर हर वीडियो पे जो कोई जिसने भी उसको क्रिटिसाइज किया है, उसको सब जाके उसके ट्रोल आर्मी ने गाली ही दिया है, गाली दे के बोला है कि आप लोग तो सिर्फ मतलब डिसएग्री करके छोड़ सकते थे, गाली काहे दे रहे हैं, मॉक क्यों कर रहे हैं, after the guy is actually mocking the YouTuber in his comment section. This has repeatedly happened in channel after channel. So if only you and a few of your friends are geniuses enough to see leftist propaganda in this, and we are all idiots, so be it. Then we will mock because we are idiots. I would rather take Pratik Borate criticism and conspiracy over a Dhruv Rathi promotion of the movie. That this sentence of yours, Neon, makes no sense, because what does it mean when you say you would take the criticism or you would reject the criticism or appreciation of Dhruv Rathi? What does it mean? You've watched both videos. Both people have made money already from you watching their reviews, right? So you can either say that you agree with Dhruv Rathi, or you can agree with the other guy. If you agree with that other guy, then we can have a debate and I'll prove you wrong again. Other than that, your sentence grammatically does not really hold much water. ऋषभ शेट्टी was also a wrestler in his college days. क्या बात कर रहे हो? वहां पे wrestling का culture है स्कूल में, कॉलेज में. Rigveda is about wars between 12 tribes. After the wars, the representatives of all tribes were invited with their respective deities on a yajna. All the deities were worshipped together. Yes. If Dhruv has a good point, so be it. Him being Dhruv does not. हाँ तो भाई, अब मैं भी सुबह उठ के टॉयलेट जाता हूँ, कार्ल मार्क्स भी सुबह उठ के टॉयलेट जाता था, तो मैं मार्क्सिस्ट बन गया. अच्छा, लेट्स कंटिन्यू विद द पेपर नाउ. द कॉर्पस ऑफ लिटरेचर, ये तो हो गया था ना. ये सेंटेंस बहुत बढ़िया है. ये सेंटेंस ही तो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट सेक्शन है ऑलरेडी पेपर का. The Brahmanas perceived that it was necessary to widen the social base of Brahmanism in order to meet this challenge, the challenge of losing popularity in the face of Buddhism. They therefore attempted to draw people from the non-Brahmanical fold into their sphere of influence and earn their trust in Brahmanical leadership. देखो भाई, earn their trust, इससे बढ़िया कॉम्प्लीमेंट तुम्हारे सोसाइटी के लिए, तुम्हारे कल्चर के लिए क्या हो सकता है? तुमको ये झूठ बोलना पड़ेगा कि तुम्हारे हिस्ट्री में कोई किसी के साथ बवाल नहीं करता था, कोई खराब राजा नहीं होता था, नंदा डायनेस्टी काहे के लिए पैदा हुआ था, और अर्थशास्त्र में क्रिमिनल्स के लिए लॉ क्यों है? अगर सब कोई अच्छे आदमी थे तो नंदा डायनेस्टी को क्यों हराया गया? अर्थशास्त्र क्या मिशनरी प्रोपेगेंडा है? और वी बी प्राउड ऑफ व्हाट एक्चुअली गुड थिंग्स वी डिड. सी, ब्राह्मण्स इतने पावरफुल थे, डीप स्टेट थे, क्रूएल थे, तो भाई अर्न देयर ट्रस्ट कौन करता है? इतना पावरफुल कोई ग्रुप. हाँ, अर्न देयर ट्रस्ट मतलब वी आर द डिसेंडेंट्स ऑफ अ ब्यूटीफुल सिविलाइजेशन. गाली ना देके लाइव स्ट्रीम करना है आज. हाँ, अर्न देयर ट्रस्ट के बाद तुमको झूठ चाहिए अपने सिविलाइजेशन को डिफेंड करने के लिए. आइदर तुमको आर्ग्यूमेंट करना नहीं आता है, या फिर तुमको पढ़ाई नहीं आता है, या फिर तुम्हारा सिविलाइजेशन घटिया ही है कि तुमको झूठ का सहारा लेना पड़ता है. मुझे तो सहारा नहीं लेना पड़ रहा है. यू एंड आई आर प्रोबेबली नॉट फ्रॉम द सेम सिविलाइजेशन. कहां से कॉमियों को काउंटर करने के लिए कॉमियों ने बोला सब कुछ खराब है, तो सब कुछ अच्छा का कहा के का 20 रुपए का वाला बुक पढ़ लिया हिस्ट्री का, वहां से अब बैठ के फिल्म रिव्यू करेंगे. ये कौन सा अजीब पावरफुल इवल ब्राह्मणिकल ग्रुप है जो कि अर्न करता है ट्रस्ट? बोलो, इतिहास में, स्पेशली इस समय में, पूरे दुनिया में कौन किसका ट्रस्ट अर्न करता था? रिलीजियस रीजंस में सब जाके घोड़ा वोड़ा लेके जाते थे, गांव जला देते थे. कोई ट्रस्ट अर्न करता था? ट्रस्ट अर्न करने वाला सिविलाइजेशन को डिफेंड करने के लिए तुमको बोलना पड़ेगा कि कोई राजा हरामी नहीं था, कोई राजा ने कोई ट्राइबल के ऊपर कुछ खराब नहीं किया. The result was the creation of a composite syncretic religious system which incorporated diverse rituals and beliefs without endangering the social supremacy of the Brahmanas. क्या लग रहा है ये प्राउड होने का चीज है कि नहीं? बोलो. Thus, the Puranas evolved out of an interaction between the Brahmanical tradition and many local traditions. However, by the time the first phase of the composition of the Puranas was complete, it had already acquired an identity independent of its Vedic moorings and the various assimilated local traditions. Consequently, when from the post-Gupta period, large-scale Brahmana migration started reaching areas which had hitherto been peripheral to their influence, such as Bengal, when the BBKs finally started coming in, they brought with them a Puranic worldview which was now a recognized part of the Brahmanical tradition. But the level of assimilation achieved by these Puranas must have proved inadequate to the needs of a particular region, because now a new genre of religious literature came into being, the Upapuranas, which offered a balance between the Puranic Brahmanical tradition and the exclusively religious local tradition. हाँ, ये कौन करता है? ये जो सिविलाइजेशन करता है उस समय में, जबकि ह्यूमन राइट्स का चीज नहीं, नाम का चीज नहीं था, यूएन नहीं था, कोई बवाल करेंगे तो फेसबुक पे वीडियो नहीं डाल पाएंगे इमीडिएटली. ठीक है, उस सिचुएशन में जाके, उस सिचुएशन में एग्जिस्ट करके, पैदा होके लोग ट्रस्ट अर्न कर रहे थे और बैलेंस कर रहे थे एक व्यू को एक ऑपोजिट व्यू के साथ। हाँ, ये प्राउड होने का चीज नहीं है, इसके ऊपर तुमको झूठ चाहिए। सब सब चंगा था, सबके बीच में वही एकमात्र कारण है, क्योंकि फॉर विच आवर सिविलाइजेशन वाज ग्रेट, दैट्स व्हाई आई एम अ पेट्रियट एंड हिंदुत्ववादी। झूठ के बेसिस पे तुम हिंदुत्ववादी बने बैठे हो, इसीलिए तुमको इमीडिएटली गुस्सा होकर सबको ब्लॉक करना पड़ता है। क्या क्या जीनियस चीजें लिखे जा रहे हैं एक जेएनयू के हिस्टोरियन के हाथों। न्यू जॉनरा ऑफ रिलीजियस। देखो, पहली बात और एक ब्रिलियंट चीज क्या है, पहले एक अटेम्प्ट लिया गया, पुरानी वर्ल्ड व्यू से हुआ नहीं, ठीक है, बात हजम नहीं हुई किसी को, जो गोल था वो अचीव नहीं हुआ, उसके बाद भी जेनोसाइड ना करके क्या किया, उपपुराणास नाम का एक और कैटेगरी ऑफ बुक्स लिखे गए, टेक्स्ट लिखे गए, स्क्रिप्चर्स लिखे गए, स्क्रिप्चर्स है नहीं वो एक्चुअली, लिखे गए, ठीक है। इंटेलेक्चुअल नॉलेज प्रोडक्शन किया जा रहा है बार 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 टू कन्विंस पीपल। इससे ज्यादा प्राइड का चीज क्या हो सकता है तुम्हारे सिविलाइजेशन के लिए। गाली ना दे के लाइव स्ट्रीम करना है आज। बट द लेवल ऑफ एसिमिलेशन अचीव्ड बाय दीज पुराणास मस्ट हैव एडुकेटेड, तो देखो, the Upapuranas, which offered a balance between the Puranic Brahmanical tradition and the exclusively regional local traditions, but with the same end in view. The largest number of the extant Upapuranas were written in Bengal, approximately between the 8th and the 13th centuries. Assimilation of local customs in some form was one of the prime endeavors of these texts. देखो, एक के बाद एक सेंटेंस में मुझे सही प्रमाण किया जा रहा है, और होपफुली हिंदुत्व 2.0 वाले जो लोग होंगे या फिर है आज भी, उसको और भी एम्यूनिशन दिया जा रहा है for which to be used, which are to be used in debates, or more reasons for you to be proud of in your civilization. वैसे कल बाय द वे मैंने थर्ड बार कांतारा देखा, this time not with my own money. A young brother asked me to go with him because he had not seen Kantara 1 in the theaters. Now he's old enough to watch it in the theaters. His mom paid for it, and now he has liked it so much that we are probably going to see it once again with his mom and his grandmother. So yesterday I noticed that I tried looking for it. I couldn't see the point of those so-called Marxist propaganda and missionary propaganda arguments. Yes, some people were being beaten up during the making of the temple. Those particular people need not have been slaves. They might have been simply laborers, and I don't see why a laborer getting beaten up once or twice, or maybe all the time every day, by an evil king is an unacceptable thing in a movie, especially when the antidote to it is dharma. The antidote to it is not Marxism, atheism, मूर्ति तोड़ देना और या फिर मिशनरीज। जो खराब राजा है उसका एंटीडोट दिया जा रहा है धर्म। एक गाने में तो लाइन ही है, सदियों से धर्म ने रक्षा किया, ऐसा कुछ लाइन है वो दिलजीत वाले गाने में। फिर मैंने नोटिस किया, जब वो आई थिंक ब्रह्म कलश के वक्त थी, वो जो प्रिपरेशन चल रहा है, अब सारे लोग नहा धो के पावन स्नान करके जाएंगे, तो एक सीन है वो रीजन में, जो सीन जो कि लोकेशन कांतारा 1 में भी था, एक जंगल के बीच में रिवर है और बहुत रॉकी एरिया है, बहुत पत्थर भी है और रिवर भी जा रहा है। वहां पे एक साथ सब लोग एक साथ उठते हैं नहा के, नमन प्रणाम के पोस्चर में। वहां पे उस पूरे ग्रुप में एक साथ, सामने ऋषभ शेट्टी है, बाकी उनके दोस्त लोग सब एक साथ उठ रहे हैं पानी से, उसमें वो मुस्लिम आदमी भी था, ठीक है। ऋषभ शेट्टी ने मुस्लिम आदमी को पावन स्नान करते हुए दिखा दिया, ऐसे हाथ जोड़ करके। ये मार्क्सिस्ट प्रोपेगेंडा है, मिशनरी प्रोपेगेंडा है ये। बहुत पिक्चरें देख ली है तुमने। और एक बात याद आया, जब पहले वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट सीन्स व्हेन द विलन किंग इज गेटिंग इंट्रोड्यूस्ड, that what's his name, I forgot his name, the guy who was in Shaitan, the main bad king, he when when his main Raj Purohit comes to put a tilak on him, it is actually deliberately shown that he was not even a believer in Hinduism, not even a believer in gods. पुरोहित आता है टीका लगाने के लिए, पुरोहित का हाथ पकड़ के बोलता है आप लगा लीजिए. ये डेलिबरेटली दिखाया जा रहा था, जो कि समझ में नहीं आया. इतना मूवीज देख लिया है कुछ लोगों ने, इसलिए ब्रेन ब्लॉक हो चुका है मूवीज देख के, या कान से मूवीज निकल रहा है, यहाँ से एक मूवी का डीवीडी है, आंखों में एक सीडी चिपका हुआ है. तो ये इंटेंट किया जा रहा था कि वो हरामी इसलिए है क्योंकि it goes hand in hand, maybe not because of it, but a guy who didn't even believe in the rituals, didn't even believe in the gods, was actually a bad person. Then you can say that, okay, I'm sure by now you all know the spoilers. तो भाई उसके फैमिली में बाकी लोग काहे हरामी थे? तो बाकी लोग किस तरह से हरामी थे? किस तरह से गांडू लोग? वो लोग इवल ब्लैक मैजिक कर रहे थे. और उनके कोलैबोरेटर्स कौन थे? एक और ट्राइब जो कि विलन है मूवी में. लो स्पॉइलर. और क्या करे? ये सब है मार्क्सिस्ट प्रोपेगेंडा. और ये सब का एंटीडोट क्या है? ये सब का एंटीडोट है पंजुल्ली दैवा, गुलिगा दैवा और माचा मुंडी. ये है मार्क्सिस्ट और मिशनरी प्रोपेगेंडा का नमूना. जीनियस लोग बैठे हैं. अब थोड़ा कॉफी पी लेना दो. गुलशन, यस. ना स्पॉइलर और क्या करे, अब 1.5 हफ्ता हो गया, अभी किसी ने नहीं देखा तो क्या करे. Also the Bangla kingdom allied themselves with another Adivasi evil tribe so that, yes. No, he didn't block me. उसे पता भी नहीं है मैं एग्जिस्ट करता हूँ, इसलिए मुझे ब्लॉक नहीं किया. वो बोल रहा था कि जिन लोगों के साथ आज तक दोस्ती वोस्ती थी उन लोगों को सब ब्लॉक कर रहे हैं. तो भाई बाहुबली में तो ये भी दिखाया गया था. बाहुबली में भी तो पीट पीट कर ही वो मतलब भल्लाल देव का मूर्ति खड़ा करवा रहे थे. तो क्या वो मार्क्सिस्ट प्रोपेगेंडा था? वो मार्क्सिस्ट प्रोपेगेंडा नहीं था, क्योंकि उसमें उस फैमिली में कुछ अच्छे लोग भी थे. पूरा फैमिली अगर हरामी है नंदा डायनेस्टी की तरह, तब वो मार्क्सिस्ट प्रोपेगेंडा है. तो फिर मुद्रा राक्षसा नाम का जो नाटक है 800 एडी में लिखा गया था, जिसके बेसिस पे आज हम थोड़ा बहुत जानते हैं चाणक्य के बारे में, तो वो मार्क्सिस्ट प्रोपेगेंडा है, मिशनरी प्रोपेगेंडा है. अंडर एवरेज देख देख के एवरेज गोल्ड ही लगेगा. Pretty much. What would be the points of improvement? Less comedy. I'm very much opposed to comedy in these kinds of movies, because there's a Bengalis will know about this. There's a famous character called Lalmohan Ganguly in a very popular detective series called Feluda. I can't stand that person. I can't stand the existence of that person, that character in all those stories. It all seems very pointless. It's even extra irritating because of the Hindi voiceovers of South Indian cinemas, films. सबको एक ही वॉइस में, कि जिसको भी वॉइस ओवर में हायर करो सबका वॉइस एक ही तरह है, यही ऐसे ही बात करते हैं. क्या अजीब चीज है. नकल करने गया, खांसी हो गया. And by the way, guys, my immunity is sacrificed right now because my fingers are dislocated, tendons are torn, microfractures, etc., for which my workouts are getting sacrificed, which is my immunity is a little screwed up at this point. Anyway, तो वो वॉइस ओवर के वजह से दैट कॉमेडी इज एक्स्ट्रा इंटॉलरेबल. एंड देन this is not really a fault of Rishabh Shetty. He cannot go inch by inch and check out each and everything that happens in all the other languages. But हिंदी डबिंग का हर साउथ का फिल्म के गाने में, हिंदी डब में ये प्रॉब्लम है कि वोकल्स इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन से 10, 15, 20 dB ऊपर रहता है. ठीक है, जो कि साउथ में के मूवीज में नहीं होता है, हॉलीवुड मूवीज में नहीं होता है, हॉलीवुड के मतलब वेस्ट के कोई गाने में भी नहीं होता है. ये सिर्फ और सिर्फ एक अजीब इनसिक्योरिटी सिर्फ बॉलीवुड में है और उसको कॉपी करके बंगाल के टॉलीवुड में है. ठीक है, अगर इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन का वॉल्यूम यहां रहता है बाकी वर्ल्ड में, जो कि स्टैंडर्ड है ऑलमोस्ट, और इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन यहां रहता है, वोकल यहां रहता है, साउथ में वही होता है. बॉलीवुड में इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन यहां रहता है, वोकल यहां पे रहता है. तो वो वैसा ही वॉल्यूम बैलेंसिंग हुआ है सब हिंदी वर्जन्स का. तो वो एक प्रॉब्लम है जो कि हॉल में और भी स्टार्कली कान में आता है, लास्ट इन कंतारा 1 इट वाज इवन मोर हॉरिड. सिंगारा सीरियल का तो कॉम्पोजिशन में ही लिरिक्स राइटिंग में इतना प्रॉब्लम है कि जोर जोर के मतलब फोर्सिबली घुसाना पड़ा है इतने सारे हिंदी वर्ड्स, और अचानक से जल्दी उनको लगा कि अरे पॉपुलर हो रहा है तो हिंदी करते हैं जल्दी जल्दी. तो ऐसे लिरिक्स लिखे गए कि उसमें सिंगारा सीरियल का मेलोडी ठीक से खुल ही नहीं पा रहा था. ब्रह्म कलश में और रेबल सॉन्ग में मुझे वो कंप्लेन तो नहीं है, बहुत बहुत बढ़िया काम हुआ है. ऋषभ शेट्टी ने लग रहा है बैठ के वो चेक किया है एटलीस्ट. मगर कल मैंने देखा कि हर हर दिन कुछ ना कुछ अपडेट हो रहा है मूवी में. ठीक है, फर्स्ट डे मैंने फर्स्ट शो देखा, सबटाइटल्स नहीं दिखा. फर्स्ट डे शाम का शो देखा, वहां पे सबटाइटल्स भी आ गया, और चामुंडी को चावुंडी बोल रहे थे किसी रीजन से. कल एक और अपडेट देखा कि एक तो है कि माँ चामुंडी के वॉइस को एक फीमेल वॉइस से करवाया गया है दिस टाइम. और जो मुझे बहुत घटिया लगा वो है क्लाइमैक्स के टाइम पे जब गुलिकादेव आए हैं ऋषभ शेट्टी के शरीर में, तब वो जो सीन है कि वो शेर कूद रहा है, उसके साथ साथ ऋषभ शेट्टी का फेस भी ऐसे घूमता है कैमरा की तरफ, है ना, स्लो मोशन में. उस मोमेंट पे एक बहुत बढ़िया एक फ्यूजन ट्रैक चल रहा था. ठीक है, डब स्टेप एग्जैक्टली नहीं, बट एटलीस्ट मतलब हाँ काइंड ऑफ डब स्टेप एक बीट चल रहा था, उसके ऊपर बहुत बढ़िया क्लासिकल वोकल्स का कुछ कॉम्पोजिशन चल रहा था, जो कि पहले दिन मैंने जब देखा, 2 बार देखा, 2 बार ही उसमें कन्नड़ा वोकल्स ही थे, जो कि बहुत बढ़िया वॉल्यूम बैलेंस किए गए थे. कल जो वर्जन मैंने देखा, अचानक से सुन रहा हूँ कि कुछ उल्टा पुल्टा हिंदी लिरिक्स कान में आ रहा है. कौन सा गाना ये याद भी नहीं है मुझे याद नहीं था कि उस जगह पे ऐसा म्यूजिक था. तो मुझे तो इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन कुछ सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है. मैं सोच रहा हूँ तो कि ये कौन सा गाना कहाँ से आया, और वो इम्पैक्ट वाला सीन कब आएगा कब आएगा, क्योंकि उस सीन में बहुत बहुत इम्पैक्ट था. वो इम्पैक्ट 80% उस म्यूजिक के लिए था कि अचानक इतना एक इंडियन कल्चरल सेटिंग है, अचानक से ये डबस्टेप के म्यूजिक के ऊपर इंडियन क्लासिकल वोकल्स आके उसमें से शेर कूद रहा है, उसके ऊपर से ऋषभ शेट्टी कूद के ऐसे इधर इधर देख रहा है कैमरा की तरफ. वो सब मिला के बहुत बढ़िया सीन बन गया. उस सीन का मेरे ख्याल से एटलीस्ट सिंस आई वाज वाचिंग इट फॉर द थर्ड टाइम, मेरे लिए तो कुछ भी इम्पैक्ट नहीं हुआ, सिर्फ और सिर्फ इसलिए कि वो हिंदी मिक्स में वॉल्यूम था वोकल्स का, यहाँ पे इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन सुनाई नहीं दिया. अचानक से सिर्फ वहां पे जाके कुछ वोकल ये सब सुनाई दिया. ये सब इंप्रूवमेंट्स हो सकते हैं. आई डोंट नो हाउ. नो, आई हैव नॉट वॉच्ड विद कन्नड़ ऑडियो. चामुंडी इज द नेम ऑफ द देवा, आई सी. सो इट्स नॉट चामुंडी. कुछ और सबटाइटल्स में तो मैं चामुंडी ही देख रहा था. फर्स्ट हाफ तो बेसिक एंथ्रोपोलॉजी, यस. Hindi dubbing of the movie is bakwas. Hindi dubbing in the industry in itself is very bakwas. All of their dubbings are insanely bad, and Tollywood, Kolkata's voiceover artists follow Bollywood voiceover artists' skills and their best practices blindly, which is why Bengali dubs are insanely bad. It's Chamundi Daiva, they don't mispronounce or misspell. Oh, तो भाई पहले कहाँ से चामुंडी लग रहा सुनाई दे रहा था हर जगह में. सबटाइटल्स में भी मैंने देखा था शायद, या फिर हिंदी वॉइस ओवर में गलत बोला है क्या. हिंदी वॉइस ओवर में तो चामुंडी नहीं सुनाई दिया. हेडुलन देयर सजेस्टिंग के कन्नड़ा में ही देख के सबटाइटल्स पढ़ लेते. नहीं, पूरा का पूरा मूवी सबटाइटल्स पढ़ने से नहीं होगा. When you said that the standard of Indian cinema has been raised, I didn't believe you at first. Now Kantara is going to be the second ever movie I'm going to watch twice. The standard has been raised for many other things that people know. One particular reason which I'm liking the most is the way a king's environment, the atmosphere, the situation is being depicted. You get, as an audience, you get embedded into that atmosphere. Okay, you feel like, yeah, I'm kind of in front of that king. हाँ, ऐसे लोग आ रहे हैं, ऐसे लोग बात कर रहे हैं, ऐसे काइंड ऑफ चिल्ड या फिर नॉन चिल्ड एटमॉस्फेयर जो भी चल रहा है, वो एक ह्यूमनली बिलीवेबल एटमॉस्फेयर चल रहा है मेरे सामने, जो कि भारत के इतिहास में कभी भी मुझे नहीं लगता है हुआ है कोई भी मूवी में. राजा का रा भी आया तो मतलब सीधा बाहुबली है टारगेट. सिर्फ ग्रैंडियर के बिना कुछ होता ही नहीं था. पूरे सुबह से शाम राजा लोग उठ के सिर्फ महलों में ऊपर नीचे करते थे, सिर्फ युद्ध करते थे, बढ़िया डायलॉग देते थे, पीछे म्यूजिक बजता था. ऐसा ही जीवन था सबका. कोई छोटा मोटा बवाल, हरामीपंती, ये सब कुछ नहीं था कोई राजा के जीवन में. फैमिली बवाल कुछ नहीं था, सिर्फ सिनेमैटिक लाइफ जीते थे राजाएं. वो भाई यहाँ पे एकदम ध्वस्त कर दिया गया है, एंड इट हैज टू बी डेलिबरेटली. कि वो ब्यूटीफुल जो सेटिंग है, वो एक कोजी एटमॉस्फेयर है, साउंड डिजाइन है, जो कि लग रहा है कि हाँ एक हम छोटे मोटे घर के अंदर हैं. वो realistic depiction of a king's family and a setting, that has fascinated me most. Regarding the Tika thing, I don't think it was a thought out of choice, but just a cultural recall since Rishabh Shetty is from Udupi, which was also Maoist affected. I guess you're not talking about the point I was making, right? That Tika nahi lagayega, and see, he's also a bad king. वो चामुंडी है, ओरिजिन स्टोरी भी चामुंडा काली से अलग है. चामुंडी इज काइंड डॉटर दैवा ऑफ जनरेशन ऑफ कुलिका. या चामुंडी, first of all, I had heard Chamundi. Maybe I mistook it to be Chamundi because I had never heard the word Chamundi. But even Chamundi was making sense to me because after all, गान में शिव और पार्वती का नाम बार बार लिया जा रहा था ब्रह्म कलश में. बट आई वॉज वंडरिंग के गुलिका देव तो बोलते कि मेरी बहन आ रही है, तो आई थॉट चामुंडी, माँ चामुंडी बहन कैसे हुई? आई डिड नॉट नो द थियोलॉजी बिहाइंड इट. So now it makes sense that it was Chamundi. Right-wing films are either atrocity lit or war heroes. Bhai, yeah. It's Chamundi Daiva, yeah. Do you consider Kantara right? I definitely consider Kantara right-wing film. यहाँ पे संस्कृताइजेशन सिंक्रेटिज्म का जो प्रोपागेंडा किया है, वो प्रोपागेंडा तो शायद झूठ को प्रोपागेंडा बोलते हैं ना, या फिर लेट्स से प्रचार, इवेंजलाइज किया है राइट विंग व्यू को, जो कि सत्य है. वो ऋषभ शेट्टी से बढ़िया या फिर ऋषभ शेट्टी से पहले कोई किसी ने किया भी नहीं है. सटल मैसेजिंग जिसको बोलते हैं, यू कैन शो मी एनी सच सटल मैसेजिंग इन एनी फिल्म. कश्मीर फाइल्स, उड़ी, ये सब तो डॉक्यू फीचर्स हैं. सबको और उसके ऊपर एक और डॉक्यू फीचर फाइल, डॉक्यू फीचर ही चाहिए. फिक्शन, कहानी, ये नाम का कोई फिल्म नहीं होगा. सिर्फ जानते रहे फिरेंगे कि हाँ कौन से हिंदू के साथ क्या खराब हुआ या फिर कौन सा हिंदू राजा बढ़िया था. यही होगा हमारा एंटरटेनमेंट का मेनू कार्ड सिर्फ. ठीक है, क्या क्यूबा. तो ये पहला मूवी है जिसमें एक्चुअली सटल मैसेजिंग है कि नहीं, तुम ये सोचते थे, अब ये तुम्हारे दिमाग में हम घुसाएंगे, इंसेप्शन करेंगे. ये राइट विंग मूवी ही है, इसमें सटल मैसेजिंग ही हुआ है और इससे पहले कभी नहीं हुआ है. इस तरह पार्वती चामुंडी वर केप्ट इंटेंशनली इंटैक्ट टू काउंटर elitism. I even consider Norway vs. Chatterjee as right wing. Achha, I have not seen it. The movie had just too much information, cluttering the whole story, unfortunately. Yeah, I kind of blocked out the first half. First half is just Pirates of the Caribbean for me. You're absolutely right. I was focused on Rukmini Vasant, that I could not see propaganda. Rishabh is a state level wrestler in school. We also have wrestling culture. अरे बाप रे, प्रॉपर कुश्ती. I see. तो एथलीट पैदा क्यों नहीं होते? सब टेक में चले जाते हैं क्या? हरियाणा थोड़ा रिलेटिवली पुअर है, इसलिए शायद उस स्पोर्ट में रहते हैं. हाँ, वैसा ही होगा, क्योंकि उस स्पोर्ट में जाने से वो सरकारी नौकरी वोकरी मिलेगा, इसलिए वो सब तो कर्नाटका वासियों को नहीं चाहिए शायद. नहीं तो थोड़ा रेसलर जाना चाहिए कर्नाटका से. दादा, आई डोंट नो व्हाई बट आई हैवंट बीन एबल टू गेट द फिल्म आउट ऑफ माय माइंड. देयर इज इवन सम डिस्कम्फर्ट. तो भाई तुम ही तो अभी बोल रहे थे कि यू विल पिक प्रतीक बुड़ादेव क्रिटिसिज्म over Dhruv Ratti's appreciation. Okay, let's continue with the paper. Kantara 1 should have been a 25 episode. Meant it the other way. It wasn't that he wanted to show that the character didn't accept the Tika and was bad, but that coastal Karnataka collectively think atheists are bad because of... Oh, Barbarika, I think you are wrong probably here, because I heard our esteemed film buff say that Rishabh Shetty allegedly made some Naxal sympathizing movie in his earlier days in his career, which I'm not sure of now. I can't trust this guy anymore. But if that is the case, maybe he had also a leftist view of the world, which would make sense in India and being an artist in India. So then your point probably won't stick. But I don't know. The Kannadigas will have to tell me here. Did his earlier films have a pro-Naxal angle? It was anti-Naxal film called Ricky. तो भाई हमारे बहुत फिल्म में देखे हुए रिव्यूअर ने तो बोला कि उसमें नक्सल प्रोपागेंडा था, या फिर प्रो नक्सल व्यूज थे उसमें. नंदीश बोल रहा है ऑन माय रीवॉच फर्स्ट हाफ वाज मोर एंटरटेनिंग. इसीलिए तुम जैसे लोगों के लिए ही हमको बैठ के कॉमेडी देखना पड़ता है. The trailer itself bashes Naxal. Not exactly pro Naxal. तो भाई रिव्यू में तो बोला उसने बहुत फिल्में देखा है, तो जाके अब बोलो उसको. ठीक है, कंटिन्यू करते हैं. व्हाट अ ब्यूटीफुल पैराग्राफ। यहीं से कितना पॉइंट्स हम खोद के निकाल सकते हैं। Upapuranas offered a balance between the Puranic Brahmanical tradition and the exclusively regional local traditions, but with the same end in view. The largest number of the extant Upapuranas were written in Bengal, approximately between the 8th and 13th centuries AD. Assimilation of local customs in some form was one of the prime endeavors of these texts. Indeed, in the epics, which are justly considered proto-Puranic, the tendency to acknowledge and uphold Lokadharma, religious duties of the common people, was already discernible. What is called Lokadharma in the Mahabharata was transformed into the Achara in the more explicit Bengal Puranas. Or be direct. कि ये करो, ये मत करो. Achara is a difficult term to translate, but it corresponds roughly to the custom, practice, and usage of a specific region at a given time, in consonance with one's stage and order of life. The Bengal Puranas declare that one must perform the duties prescribed by the Vedas and demonstrate allegiance to the Puranic high gods, because these are inescapable preconditions of dharma. But even such acts of merit are rendered ineffective if one deviates from the locally prevailing custom, because in all sacred scriptures, achara has the first consideration. Dharma arises from achara. इसके बाद किसी को लगता है मुझे झूठों का सहारा लेना पड़ेगा मेरे कल्चर को, मेरे देश को, मेरे मेरे धर्म को अच्छा बोलने के लिए. How? Why? Why would I need a guarantee of only good kings for 5,000 years in every region of India to be proud of my country when I'm reading paragraph of things to be proud of from a history paper written by a probably Marxist historian from JNU in the year 2000? Not even 2016 के बाद लिखा नरेंद्र मोदी से नौकरी मांगने के लिए. तो भाई पढ़ो ठीक से चीजें. सिर्फ नॉन कॉमी है इसलिए बुक उठा के पढ़ लिया वो मत करो. कॉमियों ने प्रोपागेंडा अच्छा किया, मगर बहुत गांडुओं तो भी पैदा किए. तुम क्या गांडू बनना चाहते हो सिर्फ कॉमियों को काउंटर करने के लिए? कॉमियों ने ऐसे ऐसे बहुत बुक्स पढ़े हैं लास्ट डेकेड्स में कि हाँ कोई बुक है लेफ्टिस्ट नाम का टॉपिक है, चलो पढ़ लेते हैं. हाँ हाँ एकदम ठीक लिखा है, खुद सोच भी लिया. वैसा राइट विंग तुमको क्यों बनना है? बनना है तो भाई हिंदुत्व 1.0 में रहो. हम लोग हिंदुत्व 1.0 को रिटायर करवाने वाले हैं 5-10 सालों में. तो अभी हमारे साथ आ जाओ, नहीं तो इरेलीवेंट बन जाओ या फिर लाफिंग स्टॉक बन जाओ, ब्लॉक करते फिरो लोगों को. But even such acts of merit are rendered ineffective if one deviates from the locally prevailing custom, because in all sacred scriptures, achara has the first consideration. Dharma arises from achara. Can Mahavatar Parashuram have animation like Pixar? Or it's not going to be animation, right? I'm not getting it because the font also seems same. तो विकी कौशल का परशुराम और ये नरसिम्हा वाला डायरेक्टर का परशुराम अलग फिल्म है. तो we are going to get pretty much in the same year 2 Parashuram movies. Is it so? Or I thought the Parashuram movie is not going to be animation, it's going to be live action. Which is the case? I'm not getting it. There is no specific definition of Upapurana. They brand Upapuran according to their own beliefs. There isn't any mention of the term Upapuran. Fair enough. There are 2 different Parashurams. ये क्या coincidence है? This is going to be fun. पिक्सार लाइक एनिमेशन शायद नहीं. भाई कांतारा इतना बड़ा हिट था, कांतारा 1, उसके बाद भी कांतारा 2 को 125 करोड़ का बजट दिया गया है. तो एनिमेटेड मूवी को और कितना बजट देंगे? 100 करोड़ तक क्या देंगे? अगर वैसा दे तो तब शायद हो सकता है. आई डोंट एक्सपेक्ट दैट मच. एंड बोथ आर कॉल्ड महावतार परशुराम. यस, दैट्स व्हाई आई गॉट कंफ्यूज्ड. Said clearly that all his movies are going to be animated. अच्छा, तो the entire universe will be animated. देखो एनिमेट करने वाले लोग तो है, VFX के लोग तो है, ये तो पता चल गया है कांतारा चैप्टर 1 से भी और महावतार नरसिम्हा में ही. सिर्फ बजट का इशू है. अगर उनके पास 17 करोड़ के जगह 100 करोड़ होता तो पूरा का पूरा महावतार नरसिम्हा ही क्लाइमैक्स जैसा बढ़िया बनता. उन्होंने तो पूरा 17 करोड़ में क्या 16 करोड़ ही सिर्फ महावतार नरसिम्हा को ही एनिमेट करने में लगा दिया, और जो बाकी पैसा बचा था वो वड़ा अवतार को एनिमेट करने में लगा दिया है. बाकी सब लोगों ने शायद ऐसे ही कोलैबोरेट करके कर लिया, थोड़ा दोस्त हो, ठीक है चलो एग रोल खिला देंगे, चलो ये काम कर दो मेरे लिए, वैसे वैसे ही कर दिया होगा। उतना टाइम और अटेंशन अगर पूरा फिल्म को दिया जाए तब बहुत बढ़िया होगा, मगर उसके लिए बहुत बहुत पैसे चाहिए। If I want to do voice in Mahavatar, what should I do? You should buy a few cinema theaters where the Bengali version will release. Other than that, um, if you can contact the directors, producers on social media, have a bunch of voiceover reels of different kinds, and send it to a lot of local studios first, Bengali serial dubbing studios, etc., where you will have some experience as a voiceover artist. वो एक्सपीरियंस दिखाने से और भी चांसेस बढ़िया होंगे. Only issue with Mahavata Narasimha, they should have started the movie with Jay Vijay story rather than Diti Kashyap. For example, they call Kalika Puran Upa Puran, but in Kalika Puran it mentions itself as Mahapuran. Same goes for Brahma Vaivat Puran. Okay. I've recorded voice of Narasimha Dev and Prahlad Maharaj and it's saved in my mobile. क्या वॉइस ओवर है भाई, भाई क्या वॉइस ओवर है महावतार नरसिम्हा का. ओह क्या क्या भाई, मैं अभी आधे घंटे पहले बोल रहा था कि हिंदी वॉइस ओवर्स बहुत खराब होते हैं, मगर वहां पे एटलीस्ट नरसिम्हा अवतार का वॉइस जो हुआ है बहुत अच्छा लगा मुझे. देख इन नखों को, डायलॉग भी इतना बढ़िया है, उठा शस्त्र, क्या कुछ कुछ खराब नहीं है उस क्लाइमैक्स शुरू होने के बाद से. ना ही मैं नर हूं और ना ही मैं पशु, नरसिम्ह. और एनिमेशन कितना बढ़िया था, सब एक्सप्रेशंस एकदम कैरी फॉरवर्ड हो रहे थे, जो कि सबसे बहुत कठिन काम है एनिमेशन में. मैं हंस रहा हूँ इसलिए वॉइस ओवर कॉपी नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ, नहीं तो आई कुड कॉपी इट. देयर हैज बीन सम कंप्यूटराइज्ड कंप्यूटर एफेक्ट्स का हेल्प तो है ऑडियो में, मगर इवन द को बेसिक वॉइस ओवर इज एब्सोल्युटली ब्रिलियंट. आई होप द नेक्स्ट मूवी हैज सच ग्रेट सॉन्ग्स. वो अच्छा, बाय द वे, वो सॉन्ग में भी वो सेम घपला है जो मैं हिंदी सॉन्ग्स के बारे में बोल रहा था. रोड ऑफ नरसिम्हा गाने में पूरा परकशन के बहुत ऊपर अचानक से वोकल शुरू होता है. वो मेन नर 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 नरसिम्हा नर, वो मेलोडी नहीं, जो वो उग्र रूप जो कि मेन लिरिक्स है, वो बहुत हाई वॉल्यूम में है. उसका अगर तुमको डिफरेंस जज करना है, कंपेयर इट विथ एनी बाहुबली सॉन्ग, एनी कांतारा चैप्टर 1 सॉन्ग, any of my Hindu workout playlist song, okay, all from all the South movies, you'll see the stark difference. अचानक से यहाँ पे वोकल परकशन सब गायब पीछे. Great voice actors, yes. All the budget went to Narasimha animation, which is fine. Yeah, and the Vara Avatar was also very well animated. Animation needs patience, time. Yes, it took 1 year for making. Yeah. Let's see. It is obvious that they shall. In these instances, the term achara has been used in its widest possible sense, but it also has specific implications. These texts recommend that all the varnas should perform the practice of the village, gramachara, prevailing at the time, in keeping with the ways of the smritis, or the practice of different places, deshachara, should be followed by the people born in those places. Varna, sub-varna करेंगे. The Brihanna Purana. Brihanna Purana. I've never heard of this Puran. What's the Bengali pronunciation supposed to be for this? Anyone? Brihanna Puran. Brihanna. Why haven't I ever heard of this word? Brihat Naradiya Puran. अच्छा. Brihanna Puran. Brihat Naradiya. I see. What a complex language. So the Brihannaradya Purana further proclaims, correct statement is truth. Those who are committed to dharma will tell the truth, which is not contrary to dharma. Therefore, statements wise men make after proper consideration of time and space, deshakala divigyanat, which are in conformity with their own dharma, are truth. तो अगर मेरा धर्मा इन अ वे है प्रोफेशन फिल्म रिव्यू करना, और अगर मैं झूठ बोलूं, ऑफ कोर्स ही डजंट नो ही इज लाइंग, सो या ही इज स्टिल धार्मिक. Thus, it does not hesitate to designate even truth as context specific and hence conditional. Such is the magnitude of importance placed on local customs. और उसके बाद प्रोपागेंडा किया जाता है कि नहीं, ये तो नॉन हिंदू है, और कोई मूवी आके बोलता है कि देखो सब कुछ हिंदू ही है, तो उसको लेफ्टिस्ट प्रोपागेंडा भी बोला जाता है. It is obvious that Desha, place, here refers to small localities inhabited by little communities and not to the wider regional unit. Apart from Achara, the other expression that the Bengal Puranas use frequently is Laukika, literally popular. The Brihadharma Purana apportions dharma into two fundamental categories, Vedika and Laukika. At times, they seem to be independent of and yet consistent with each other, and at other times, they form a continuum. Significantly, the Brahmoboiborto Puran asserts that in case of a conflict between these two sources of dharma, popular custom must prevail, भाई. देखो कितना नेगोशिएशन का एंड रिजल्ट क्या, कि हाँ, लोकल प्री वैदिक जो सिविलाइजेशन थे, जो बिलीफ्स थे या फिर व्यूज थे, उनको अल्टीमेटली ही प्रायोरिटाइज किया जाएगा, जस्ट इन एक्सचेंज फॉर बीइंग पार्ट ऑफ अ बिगर होल. ये मेरे लिए एनफ रीजन है टू बी प्राउड ऑफ दिस सिविलाइजेशन भाई. Before Puranic Brahmanism reached Bengal, it was already under the pervasive influence of Tantra, with its emphasis on low castes and on women in religious performances. Moreover, Bengal was one of the last strongholds of Buddhism in India. Thus, it was a difficult terrain for the imposition of the Brahmanical worldview. Leftist propaganda क्या है? ये ऐसे words है leftist propaganda. Imposition of the Brahmanical worldview. ऐसा खामोखा ये नेगेटिव विलेन बनाने का कोई जरूरत नहीं था. प्रमाण के ऊपर प्रमाण खुद दिए जा रहे हैं स्कॉलर, कि नहीं, एक नेगोशिएशन, एक कोऑपरेशन का माहौल चल रहा था, फिर वर्ड यूज करेंगे इंपोजिशन. इसको लेफ्टिस्ट प्रोपागेंडा बोलो. कौन मेंबर हुआ? स्कंद भट्ट. हाँ, हाय स्कंद, थैंक यू फॉर बिकमिंग अ मेंबर. Thus, it was a difficult terrain for the imposition of the Brahminical worldview. In such situations, the usual Puranic technique is to isolate the single major pre-existing factor within the local cultural traditions, to transform and legitimize it, and then to use the same factor to promote and transmit its own ideas. In Bengal, the Puranas chose the goddess, presumably because of her pervasive presence among the local people, and constructed a regional cult which later became one of the major symbols of Bengal's cultural tradition. By regional cult, I refer to the cults of the middle range, more far-reaching than any parochial cult of the little community, yet less inclusive in belief and membership than a world religion in its most universal form. I don't see why we are supposed to care about this. John Leavitt has identified at least three major features of a regional cult: annual, seasonal, and calendrical cycles of regional rituals, social patterning within which such rituals take place, and people's background knowledge of the divinities who are a part of the myths and songs invoked in these rituals. All these attributes can be observed in the cult of the regional goddesses of Bengal that the Puranas created and helped to promote. Let me discuss one example of the process of creation of a goddess of regional dimension from the locally available material. The presiding goddess of a very popular non-Brahminical women's vrata, vowed observance, in Bengal is Mongol Chondi. Mongola Chondi, I think. Guys, is this supposed to be Mongola Chondi or Mongol Chondi? Mongol Chondi Kabbo to I know, but since it's a woman, since it's a female name, I'm guessing it should be Mongola Chondi, right? But they have not put that overhead dash on it, so it's probably pronounced Mangala Chandi. So in that case, Mongol Chondi. So let's see. Chondi Mongol. No, I see. So Mongol Chondi. Mangal Chandi is not mentioned in any of the high-profile Sanskrit texts written outside of Bengal, but she is fairly prominent among the less important goddesses in the Bengal Puranas. Mongol Chandi. I see. A major long vernacular poem, Mongol Kabbo, Mangala Kavya, was composed in 16th century Bengal in her honor, and printed collections of Vratakathas and Panchalis of Mangala Chandi are produced in large numbers even today. When these apparently disparate accounts of the goddess are matched, they reveal an intricate complex of interpenetration of traditions and of survivals and transformations in the Brahmanical assimilative process spread over nearly a millennium. This is where we must declare, therefore, since mediums uh, of information dissemination change, today films are almost as popular or hold the same value in our hearts as a population of 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds, etc. Similar to what books, the kind of value books would hold in past generations. So therefore, why shouldn't we consider Kantara a modern day Purana or an Upapurana? Tell me, why shouldn't we? Actually, one of our viewers, Abhay, had pointed this out, that it's almost made like a Purana. And now I see it's basically doing the same job. This subtle messaging, this message of unity, while telling a story, was one of the key features of Puranas. Tell me why Kantara chapter 1 is not a modern day Purana. Historia de Gora, what I'm understanding from these papers is that anything that's not the main 18 Puranas is an Upapurana. Is Puran like, Puran adjacent, that's Upapuran. Brahmanical worldview, yes. It's not a modern day Purana because it's a legend. What do you mean it's a legend? Don't Puranas ever talk about legends? Don't they document, haven't they ever documented legends? You can say the entire content is a legend, King Bodonti, but the movie presenting it to us today, that movie is a Purana, not the contents of the movie. Okay, the contents are that legend. Upapurana is a sub Purana written after the main Purana. Yeah, pretty much. The Devi Purana refers to a goddess called Mangala, who it says should be worshipped to ward off evil and to attain happiness. Shoshibhushan Dasgupta believes that Mangala is the precursor of the later Mongol Chandi. He cites a verse from Shabdakalpadrum, which mentions Mangala as one of the 8 yoginis. Of these, Mangala and Shankota, what's this supposed to be in Bengali, are worshipped through vratas by Bengali women. The Sanskrit texts, however, neither recommend nor lay down the procedure for a formal worship of these yoginis in the Brahmanical way. Dasgupta conjectures that they were non-Brahmanical goddesses venerated by women. Therefore, Brahmanism was willing to accommodate them up to a point, but was not prepared to accept them within the Brahmanical pantheon, although even that changed later on. Don't we see it now? And just to elaborate for the person who was saying that it's a legend, it's not a Puran. If it, let's say it was in fact a story that we have found even in Puranas, and someone made a movie on that, then that movie would not become a Purana, okay? Because it's not doing the job of the Purana. It's simply regurgitating something that's already been written in a Purana. But that's not what Kantara chapter 1 is doing. It's taking a legend and presenting it today in the form of the medium that's pretty popular. And therefore, in effect, its implications, okay? Let's say the job it's doing is the exact same job that a Purana or Upapurana used to do. Therefore, Kantara chapter 1 is an Upapurana. Not that the story can be found in any Upapurana. Who is the authority to define Brahmanical or non-Brahmanical? I think whatever is accused of being non-Brahmanical are things that will have no existence or mention in any core Vedic text, let's say in the Vedas or in the 18 Puranas. If there is mention of those things, then it's Brahmanical. Now, if you find some things that are present in both, then it can be considered that it was later, it was written at a much later point, of course. Upapuranas and Puranas are well listed in Padma Puran. Anything outside of that has no authority. DS, let's not debate authority, because when I bring out Lord Shiva's arguments against birth-based casteism, people say Brahma Puran has no authority. Authority नहीं है, इसलिए फिर भी कोई फंड भी कर लिया, लिख भी दिया. तो ऑथोरिटी क्या है, किसका नहीं है, ये एक नेवर एंडिंग डिबेट है, एंड आई डोंट केयर अबाउट इट. बट realistically speaking, the job that Upapuranas did is the exact same job that today Kantara chapter 1 is doing, and no other film before Kantara chapter 1 has done. For those reasons, it's a modern day Purana. पुराना और उसके बाद कोई लिखा नहीं जा सकता है, लिखना मना है, ऐसा तो नहीं है हमारे कल्चर में. Therefore Kantara chapter 1 is a Upapurana. Who according to you is a Brahmin? According to me, any intellectual academic. Okay, ये footnote थोड़ा पढ़ना पड़ेगा. Very little is known about the prehistory of Bengal. Bengal's continuous association with the non-Brahminical goddesses is attested to by vernacular evidence as far back as it goes. But it cannot take us beyond the beginning of the second millennium AD. Despite the absence of archaeological evidence or written records, however, it is possible to infer the centrality of the goddesses in the religious practices of the indigenous population of pre-Puranic Bengal from ethnographic studies of the tribes and low castes of Bengal made during the late 19th century. Although Mukundaram Chakrabarti, the 16th century poet, is the best known author of Chondi Mongol Kabbo, several versions of this poem are available, composed by different authors both before and after Mukundaram. There can be little doubt that the stories that these texts narrate were borrowed from an oral code and were in wide circulation before their codification. Yeah, obviously. The Sanskrit texts, however, neither recommend nor lay down the procedure for a formal worship of these yoginis in the Brahmanical way. Dasgupta conjectures that they were non-Brahmanical goddesses venerated by women. Therefore, Brahmanism was willing to accommodate them up to a point, but was not prepared to accept them within the Brahmanical pantheon. That the eventual inclusion of this presiding goddess of a women's Vrata into the Brahmanical pantheon was an afterthought on the part of the authors of the Bengal Puranas is attested to by the possibility that they were evidently uncertain about her antecedents. The following passage from the Brahma Vaivarta and the Devi Bhagavata Puranas shows how a Puranic deity was fashioned. Shiva addresses her thus: "You bestow delight and good fortune. You bestow bliss and auspiciousness, Mangal. That is why you are called Mangala Chandika. You are the most auspicious of all that is auspicious. You are worshipped on Tuesday, Mangalavara, desired by all. The king Mangal, born of the family of Manu, always worships you. You are the bestower of auspicious salvation. People worship you on every Tuesday. You bestow abundance of bliss on all." Thus, after praising Mangala Chandika and worshipping her on Tuesday, Shiva departed. The goddess Sarvamangala was first worshipped by Shiva, next by the planet Mangal, Mars, then by the king Mangal, and then on every Tuesday by the women of every household. Finally, she was worshipped by all men desirous of their welfare. वैसे मंगलवार से याद आया, people who are finally, for the first time listening to the composer B. Ajnish Loknath's works because of Kantara chapter 1, must check out his other works as well. One of the stuff you must absolutely check out by B. Ajnish Loknath is his background score work and his songs in a 2023 Kannada movie called Mangalavara or Mangalavaram, okay? Especially the song called O Pranave. वहां पे for some reason they have made the same mistake कि vocals है पूरा loud, बाकी का पूरा music पीछे, out of the blue a Bollywood style song mix, but composition सुनो. I guarantee you, किसी को किसी सेटिंग में अगर वो ओ प्राणवे गाना तुम विदाउट एनी इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन ऐसे ही खाली वॉइस में सुना दो, कोई भी दुनिया में इंप्रेस होगा, उसका दिमाग हिल जाएगा कि वाह क्या कॉम्पोजिशन है. वो गाना सिर्फ सुनो आज, ओ प्राणवे, सिर्फ मिक्स में गोलमाल कर दिया, इतना वॉल्यूम, वोकल्स का वॉल्यूम हाई रख के. Thus, all conceivable mangalas have been heaped on her, and the original passage reads like an insensitively overdone example of alliteration. We have seen that the precursor of the Puranic Mangala Chandi was in all likelihood known as Mangala, although the goddess Chandi, later to be known as the generic name for nearly all goddesses of non-Vaishnavite affiliation, has already been described as Sarvamangala Mangalye, repository of all auspiciousness, in the Devi Mahatmya section of the Markandeya Purana. This had nothing to do with the local goddess Mangala of non-Brahminical origin. Besides, proper names are often non-connotative, and the fact that auspiciousness is a desirable quality in a goddess is an entirely coincidental occurrence in this case. Okay. Yet the Bengal Puranas accepted the literal meaning of the word and proposed a simple equation between the name and the meaning in order to justify the Puranic reconstruction of the deity. Either they were unaware of the popularity of the independent goddess Mangala, or they chose to ignore it. Footnote says, one need not look for fragments of elusive evidence to establish a connection between Mangalachandi and women. Both the Brahmavaivarta and the Devi Bhagavata Puranas state that Mangalachandi is the tutelary deity of women who grants them all their wishes. The Brahmavaivarta adds that women worship her with 5 kinds of offerings, and that Mangalachandi herself, along with Shoshti, Monosha, and a few others, is a manifested woman, Vastava Stre, who appears in every age as the best of them. Hence, it is reasonable to assume that Mangalachandi, or her prototype, was a local deity of tribal origin who was adopted by the women folk of Brahminical homes, perhaps as the deity presiding over their vratas. Yeah, makes sense. The latter, either they were unaware of the popularity of the independent goddess Mangala, or they chose to ignore it. The latter seems to be the more reasonable explanation, since the meaning ignore it, since the internal evidence of the Puranas indicates that their authors were familiar with the popular stories associated with Mangal Chandi, which came to acquire their poetical form much later in the various Chandimangal Kavyas of medieval Bengal. The Brihadharma Purana contains a verse which says, "You tricked Kalaketu by assuming the form of a lizard and granted him a boon. You are the auspicious Mangal Chandi. You saved a merchant and his son from the king Sri Salivahana by devouring and throwing up an elephant sitting on a lotus." These are, in a nutshell, the 2 stories narrated in the Chandimangal Kavyas. The vernacular poets of Bengal also knew of this verse. Indeed, Lala Jayanarayana, a Bengali poet of the Lala Jayanarayan, a Bengali poet of the 18th century, has referred to the Uttarakhanda of the Brihadharma Purana, where the verse is in fact located, and has included a translation of this verse in his Chandimangal Kabbo. In the Dhaka University collection, there is a Bengali manuscript of a Chandika Khanda, claiming to be a part of the Devi Purana, which deals in 16 chapters with these stories of Mangal Chandi. The vernacular Panchalis, which are read on the occasion of the observance of her vrata, also tell the same stories, and there are allusions to them even in the doggerel verses Chora, that young girls recite. Oh, Chora, I see. That young girls recite during the performance of a typical Kumari Vrata meant for unmarried women. In one such Chara, the goddess is asked, "Mother, why are you so late today?" She replies that she had a lot of work to attend to, one of her tasks being to free the king from the prison. This, I suspect, is a corruption of the original, or at any rate, the popular story, where the merchant was freed from the prison by the king through the grace of the goddess. Wow. Thus, Mangal Chandi is a unique example in which the different layers of her story are traceable, layers which correspond to and resonate with one another. Let's see what's the Bengali verse. Kenama Tomaraj Eta Vela. Okay, it's not written in Bengali pronunciation, or was the pronunciation supposed to be this way? I don't know. Let's see what would it sound like in modern Bengali. Kenoma Tomaraj Eto Bela, হাসতে খেলতে পাতের দোলায় দুলতে পটের দোলায় দুলতে, আই গেস, আর পাটের আচ্ছা পাটের দোলায় দুলতে, নির্ধনীকে ধান দিতে, অপুত্রকে পুত্র দিতে, কানাকে চক্ষুদান করতে, খোড়াকে কামদেব করতে, রাজাকে কারাগারে খালাস করতে, তুই আজ আমার এটা বেলা, ও তুই আজ আমার এত বেলা। And yet the Puranas ignored these. So you see, bhai, कांतारा लाइक स्टोरीज के पोटेंशियल तो है बंगाल में. लेट्स सी हाउ माय काल भैरव अष्टकम पैन्स आउट. उसके बाद हमको ही हिंदुत्व 2.0 को ही फील्ड में नामना पड़े उतरना पड़ेगा हर कुछ में, सोशोलॉजी में, इकोनॉमिक्स में, फिल्म मेकिंग में. And yet the Puranas ignored these stories, even though they were available to them in the chapters in the Brahma Vaivarta and Devi Bhagavata, where they sought to establish the credentials of Mangal Chandi with a suitable anecdote. The authors narrate the rather bald and ingenuous story of Shiva's battle with Tripurasura, the demon Tripura, Tripurantaka, whom he defeated with the help of the goddess Mangal Chandi. That they chose to succumb to such an unimaginative stereotype in preference to the much more complex and exciting stories in circulation is a clear reflection of the fact that they deliberately rejected the local popular goddess. But she was important enough to take note of. Hence, Brahmanism constructed a synthetic story in line with the archetypal Brahmanical story to assimilate the goddess and claim her as its own. Hence, the rather transparent and labored attempt to collect all the Mangalas, auspiciousness, so that the popular Mangala is substituted by the new Puranic Mangal Chandi. Kitna evil, Bapre. The Bengal Puranas failed miserably in this attempt, but their primary purpose was served. Mangal Chandi was raised to the rank of one of the approved Brahmanical goddesses. This elevation was accomplished by employing the vintage strategy of Brahmanism, namely by demonstrating identification with Chandika, the Mula Prakritiswari, Mula Prakritiswari, goddess of primordial nature. Mangal Chandi has been described repeatedly as the primary aspect of Prakriti and is said to have been born out of her mouth. She is merely another manifestation of Durga. Mangal Chandi is then equated with the high-profile goddesses who had already been established in the upper echelons of the Brahmanical hierarchy of divinities. Thus, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Durga, Savitri, Radhika predate the creation of the universe. Those who emanate from them are their manifested selves, and Mangal Chandi is one of them. The identification is so complete that Mangal Chandi has been assigned a Shakta Pitha, the most sacred centers of pilgrimage for the worshippers of the goddess. In the Brihadharma Purana, Durga proclaims that she exists as Mangal Chandi at the Mangakoshtha Pitha, Ujjaini mein, Baapre. Mangakoshtha Pitha in Ujjaini. R.C. Hajra points out that this Ujjaini is the same as the ancient city popularly known as Ujjani, which comprises the modern villages of Kogram, Mangalkot. Oh, so Bardhaman, holy cow. Mangalkot, Sanskrit Mangala Koshtaka. So I thought it's Ujjain in Madhya Pradesh. Wow. Mangalkot. So the name was Mangal Koshtaka, and hence related to Mangal Chandi. And Adal, situated on the bank of the river Ojoy in the Burdwan district of West Bengal. Both the Pitha Nirnaya and the Shivacharita, two important treatises on the subject, mention Ujjaini or Ujjani as a Mahapitha. So Mongolkot is a Mahapith. In the long list of Shakta Tirthas in the Devi Bhagavata, Ujjaini is referred to as Mahakala, the seat of Samkari, and in the Pithamala section of Bharat Chandra's Annada Mangal Kabbo, the last of the major Mangal Kavyas in Bengal, composed in the 18th century, Mangala Chandi is said to reside at Ujjani, served by a Bhairava. It is important to remember that Dhanapati, the merchant protagonist of the second story of the Chandimangala Kavyas, belonged to Ujjani. Ujjani is such a nice name for a girl, no? I've never heard of this word. At the end of this process, Brahmanism succeeded in turning Mangal Chandi into something of a Puranic celebrity. As a result, so evil, so evil. कितना मिशनरी प्रोपागेंडा है. As a result, the vernacular panchalis of Mangal Chandi, which are the authentic carriers of her popular story, in an attempt to emulate the heavy pontifical style of the Puranas, presumably for the sake of credibility, rather incongruously include a note on the procedure of her worship, complete with samanyarghya, bhutashuddhi, pranayama, karanganyasa, and the like, as well as a dhyana, meditative reflection on the nature of the goddess. This dhyana is an exact quote of the three verses of the Kalika Purana describing the goddess Mangal Chandi. It also mentions the Sanskrit mantra, sacred hymn, Narayanyai Vidmahe Tvam Chandikayai Tu Dhimahi Tanno Lalita Kanteti Tuta Pushchat Prachodayat. This is claimed to be the Gayatri of Mangalachandi and has once again been lifted straight from the Kalika Purana. Thus, Mangalachandi was turned upside down. It is virtually impossible to try and establish a chronology of such overlapping developments, simultaneously operative at many levels. For example, was Mangal Chandi a goddess with a distinct personal profile in pre Puranic Bengal merely ratified by Brahmanism, or were there many local goddesses with similar characteristics who coalesced into the synthetic figure of Mangala Chandi through Brahmanical mediation? Or they did it on their own, then one fine morning the Brahmins appeared and then they decided, yeah, let's fuse with them. So this scholar is being fair at this point. He's not making us swallow random propaganda. He's helping us think. If so, was the name Mangal Chandi a very Sanskritic name with no Sanskritic antecedent already in existence? Or was it the creation of the Bengal Puranas, which the authors of the vernacular Chandi Mongol Kabbos borrowed as a convenient medium of authentic credentials to arrange a sprawling mass of folk materials into a structured narrative? These questions cannot be answered with certainty. What is known for sure, however, is that the authors of the Bengal Puranas were evidently familiar with the folk stories associated with Mangal Chandi, which they chose to ignore, and that the various Chandi Mongol Kabbos reflect an awareness of the Brahmanical worldview which they appropriated without acknowledging its source. दोनों साइड में ही इग्नोर भी कर दिया, एसिमिलेट भी हो गया. मतलब बिग्रजिंगली जैसे फैमिली गेट टुगेदर होता है आफ्टर अ स्मॉल बवाल या फिर कॉन्फ्रंटेशन के, हाँ चलो ठीक है एक साथ चलते हैं, वैसा ही है. इससे ज्यादा प्यार मोहब्बत कैसा पॉसिबल है भाई? इससे ज्यादा नहीं है. बेटर ये है भाई. इससे ज्यादा हाइटर सोसाइटी अगर होता तो एक झटके में पूरा देश कन्वर्ट भी हो जाता. ठीक है, ये लोटर सोसाइटी का ये एक एडवांटेज ही है. Even though I absolutely love hydra societies, I have lived in a hydra society for 3.5 years. I recently went to a hydra society, so I know the benefits of a hydra society, but side effects bhi hai. Abhaya Abhaya Nagal, another Chandi Mongol Kabb. আচ্ছা, বাংলায় উচ্চারণটা কি হবে হিস্টোরিয়া দেখো ওরা? অভয় নগল, অভয়ঙ্গল. Let's see Shaptarshi's problem. Pre-Puranic Bengal, does the author even know that Puranas are records of rishis between themselves? How the hell would they take in folk stories which would anyway be individual stories? What's your exact problem with the term though? Because in this case, pre-Puranic Bengal means pre-Vedic Bengal essentially. Abhay Mongol. Acha, acha. Abhaya Mongol. Acha, acha. What is known for sure, however, is that the authors of the Bengal Puranas were evidently familiar with the folk stories associated with Mongol Chandi, which they chose to ignore, and that the various Chandi Mongol Kabbos reflect an awareness of the Brahmanical worldview, which they appropriated without acknowledging the source. Through this complex interaction, a deity with an elaborate baggage came into its own, and eventually became one of the widely recognized symbols of Bengal's cultural identity. Okay, अब थोड़ा non-atheist realm में जाते हैं, ठीक है, analysis में. This is what the deities themselves wanted to happen. This is what the deities made happen. Okay? This was a clear message. This is how you stay united. This is how they always speak in every society. Which is why when a nation is created out of thin air in 1776 and has no mythology of its own, they create their stuff and have similar characters and similar viewpoints, and similarly become attractive for the entire world, similarly become prosperous in the entire world. And then people screw up and bad things happen. So that country is now entering its dark ages, which we have kind of left behind. The contribution, but the deities will always be present in every land and speak through those people and the people in that culture through other mediums, which is why we will never have a superhero of our own, not to the extent of the popularity of things like Marvel, Batman, Star Wars. Because what you have to acknowledge, especially because you don't fully get it as a non-American, is that you are appreciating something that has been already glorified in that country, right? When something is glorified in front of you, either you watch it because it's glorified or because you want to come across as so cool that you don't glorify it, which is a negative phase of mimesis, according to Rene Girard. But why are Americans appreciating it? Without realizing these are their own mythologies. Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Batman, Superman. And I believe the deities are speaking through those writers in those situations. And so the position that those movies, those stories, the position that those stories have in that society cannot be copy pasted here. So we will always have Bhavesh Joshi every now and then. We'll have a Shaktiman because it was a huge gimmick, even though it was completely plagiarized from Superman. But our biggest movies will never be any superhero movies, no matter how much budget you spend on it, I think. Ours will be what we already have, which are our deities, our devtas and daivas. I'm getting more and more worried about the Ramayana movie every day. But what's the evidence other than pretty much? They assume there are pre-Vedic deities. The supreme goddess of Sri Kula Shaktism is Tripura Sundari. Yeah, pre-Puranic assumes that there were sprawling goddesses. Let's check this comment. Which somehow also got its place in Vedic pantheon because the scheming rishis brought in gods of these folk people to digest them. Yes, I believe in this view. What is your alternative view? That Vedic Dharma existed here parallelly. It was born on the same day as in Haryana, or it was. What's your view, Saptarshi? But anyway, I know what your problem is. Your problem is the tone that leftist scholars use when talking about these things. That evil Brahmins brought it to swallow those local deities. I don't see it that way because I have a decolonized mind, so I don't get iffy and touchy-feely about facts, which leftists agree with, but interpret it in a different way. So I see it as an absolute win. I see it as an absolute thing to be proud of, that people came here, people who didn't know each other, didn't agree with each other on how to go about their religious life, and still accommodated them. It's a story of accommodation, assimilation, and cooperation for me. It's not a story of swallowing for me. But since it is not, therefore I have the luxury of not making up my own stories. If they are not facts, what are the alternatives? The alternative is that हरियाणा में इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन के साथ ऋग्वेद या फिर वैदिक स्क्रिप्चर्स या फिर वैदिक पीपल नहीं शुरू है. एक ही टाइम पे कंबोडिया में भी शुरू हुआ, कोलकाता में शुरू हुआ, साउथ अमेरिका में शुरू हुआ, हर जगह पे एक ही दिन वन फाइन मॉर्निंग सब वैदिक कल्चर्स शुरू हो गए. That is not the case according to me. They were born in a Haryana, Afghanistan region, and then they spread eastwards. You cannot get facts about supernatural events and complex combination of them. Is the superhero thing a way of Western society, a way to 100% Slevin? You get it, yes. No society, no prosperous, happy society can function on monotheism, because you don't value individuals at all. You want individuals just to be redundant, retarded slaves of one king. हाँ हाँ राजा जी, हाँ राजा जी. वैसा करने से अच्छा प्रॉस्परस इंटेलिजेंट समाज सोसाइटी नहीं बनता है. वो बनाने के लिए ही डेटी स्पोक थ्रू अदर पीपल एंड क्रिएटेड एन ऑल्टरनेटिव टू मोनोथीज्म. जैसे कि हमारा है, हमारे पर्सनल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक फीचर्स के ऊपर डिपेंड करेगा कि हमारे इष्ट देवता कौन होंगे. बाकी सोसाइटी कल्चर का कोहेरेंस बनाए रखने के लिए ग्राम देवता, कुल देवता. Yes, but Aranyak says migration of the Banga tribe to the east. Yeah, okay. Vedic religion is a conglomeration of various people, rishis, views, and not a missionary movement which spread from a specific area. That's my view, which is also in line with the text itself. टेक्स्ट में पॉलिटिक्स नहीं है, ये अज्यूम कर लेना तो मेरे लिए पॉसिबल नहीं है. बट इवन अदर देन दैट, वेयर इवन इज द फैक्चुअल डिसएग्रीमेंट, सप्तर्षि? What you are saying and what I'm saying is pretty much the same. You are just saying the intentions were different. Conglomeration of various people अगर हुआ, कॉन्ग्लोमरेशन हुआ कैसे भाई? बिना कहीं पे जाके, अगर हरियाणा में बैठे रहते तो कॉन्ग्लोमरेशन हुआ कैसे? सबको बुलाया, चलो सब कोई हरियाणा आओ. साफ साफ बोलो, डिड वेदास एंड आर्यस कम फ्रॉम आउटसाइड? आउटसाइड का डेफिनेशन क्या है? हरियाणा तो आउटसाइड नहीं है मेरे लिए, अफगानिस्तान तो आउटसाइड नहीं है मेरे लिए, पाकिस्तान आउटसाइड नहीं है मेरे लिए, नॉर्वे तो बिल्कुल नहीं भाई. You should look up how Christianity wasn't one single thing from the start. The Nicene Creed made it one single thing. Yeah. Okay, let's continue the paper. We'll get back to the chat soon after the paper is done. Through this complex interaction, a deity with an elaborate baggage came into its own and eventually became one of the widely recognized symbols of Bengal's cultural identity. The contribution of the vernacular literature in the making of this tradition is obvious. As a result, the constitutive role of the Bengal Puranas in this process is often marginalized. देखो, नॉलेज प्रोडक्शन, ठीक है, आज भी जो होता है, आज पेपर्स लिख के सबको कॉमी बनाया जा रहा है, तब भी लिख के या फिर कंपोज करके, टेक्स्ट तो छोड़ दो, ठीक है, लिखा गया, कोडिफाई हुआ बाद में, ओरल ट्रेडिशन में भी स्टोरीज वर बीइंग रिटन एंड वर बीइंग पॉपुलराइज्ड with a specific goal in mind. इसीलिए ब्राह्मण भोजन. Bengal, however, is not an isolated example. There are several other regions in India where Brahmanism acted as a catalytic agent in the process of crystallization of their respective regional traditions, even though the mode of Brahmanical intervention and consequently the manner in which these traditions took shape might have varied from one region to another. Comparison with two other cultural regions may help illustrate this point. The history of Bengal's neighboring state Orissa closely parallels the developments in Bengal in many respects. Perhaps the most important similarity between them is the fact that Brahmanism arrived late in both regions. Thus, all that follows from it in the case of Orissa, the existence of a number of fairly well-developed indigenous traditions, the Brahmanical attempt to establish cultural hegemony through socio-religious reorganization, including the composition of a Purana, and the transformation of a local tribal deity into a prime Brahmanical godhead, have their variants in Bengal. The regional tradition of Orissa, however, derives its cultural identity primarily from a far more tangible object than the mere recognition of a common cult form, namely, a firmly located cult center. It was a temple of Jagannatha at Puri that came to symbolize the regional consciousness of an entire people. Herman Kulke has shown that the resolve of Anantavarman Kodaganga, who was personally a Shaiva all his life, to build a temple for Jagannatha at Puri around the middle of the 12th century was a political decision. By the 11th century, Vaishnavism had begun to exercise considerable influence on Orissa. Anantavarman was keenly aware of this religious trend and he decided to erect a temple for Purushottama in order to base his power on a rising movement. I can replace a few words and names from the sentence and it would be applicable today. You know why. Now, the assumption from Hindutva 1.0 people would be that no, for the first time in the history of mankind, people are so evil today. Because today we are living amidst commies, and never before in the history of mankind has evil people or commie like people existed. Thus, from the beginning, the religious complex at Puri was conceived as a legitimating agency for the rulers of Orissa. Eventually, King Ananga Bhima III adopted the god Purushottama at Puri as the official state deity in 1230 through 1231 AD, dedicated the Orissan Empire to Jagannatha, and proclaimed himself to be merely the deputy or Rauta of the god. So the Raut surname comes from here or what? I thought Rawat and Raut were same. So the Odia Raut might be from this, whereas the Rawat is something different, I guess. As the temple gained in importance as a prime center of pilgrimage both within Odisha and throughout North India, its legitimizing authority increased in scope and intensity. By the late 16th century, temple records began to describe Jagannatha as the overlord of the kingdom of Odisha, and no ruler of Odisha, whether Odia or not in origin, could hope to establish hegemonic control over the territory of Odisha without at least notionally, acknowledging this supratemporal seat of power. Except Sultan Suleiman of Bengal, who during his brief occupation of Cuttack in the third quarter of the 16th century destroyed the image of Jagannatha and desecrated the temple, all the other invaders of Orissa, including the Mughals and the Marathas and even the English East India Company, sought legitimation for their rule by attempting to gain control over the temple. When the kingdom disappeared, Jagannatha began to symbolize a growing secular force, the language centered Odia nationalism in its formative phase. This undisputed regional preeminence of Jagannatha is due primarily to the deity's physical location in a monumental temple which received sustained state patronage for a considerable period of time. The temple of Jagannatha thus became the living image and the point of convergence of the pride and aspirations of a people, which together comprise the core constituents of any regional consciousness. Bengal did not have any such temple of major regional significance. Indeed, although contrary arguments have been posed, Bengal never developed the culture of temple building as a part of premeditated state policy. Borrowing from Ronald Inden, Richard Eaton has argued in his monograph on medieval Bengal that, like several other ruling dynasties of early medieval India, such as the Pratiharas and the Rashtrakutas, the Sena rulers of Bengal also established centralized state cults, physically expressed in massive and elaborately carved temples. It is true that there are references to a number of temples in the Bengal epigraphs from the Gupta period onwards, and excavations have unearthed the ruins of several temples, a few of which were fairly large and impressive. Even the Ramacharita mentions that opulent temples were being used for worship in different parts of Varendri, while Ramapala has been credited with the construction of three rows of temples dedicated to Shiva in his newly founded capital Ramavati. Thus, there was obviously no dearth of temples in early medieval Bengal, but none of these was built on the assumptions on which the Jagannatha temple was predicated from the beginning, nor did they compare with the Jagannatha temple in dimension or significance. It is possible that the Senas had internalized the political culture of the other contemporary ruling dynasties, but the fact remains that they did not construct a grand temple which would legitimize their rule and make their subjects identify themselves with the temple as the preeminent cultural symbol of the region. From the available evidence, it seems that the temples of early Bengal were local centers of worship which eventually decayed due to lack of patronage or were destroyed by Muslim invaders. By the time the core of the Bengal Puranas was codified, state power had passed into the hands of Muslim rulers. Without the necessary political support, Brahmanism in Bengal failed to encourage the construction of a goddess temple of comparable scale around which the process of regional state formation or the organization of a priesthood into a clearly defined hierarchy would resolve, as it did in Orissa. In the absence of an overarching temple integrating diverse local elements into a common bond of loyalty, a cult center, insignificant to begin with but gradually gaining in importance over a period of time, can perform the same social function. अगर टेम्पल ना भी रहे तो कल्ट सेंटर होने से भी चलेगा. कुछ अलग तरह का cult center. The anthropologist Victor Turner has drawn attention to two spatially distinguishable kinds of cult forms. One representing crucial power divisions and classificatory distinctions within and among socially and politically discrete groups, and the other representing ritual linkages between these groups. The first emphasizes exclusiveness, while the second emphasizes inclusiveness. Wow. Cult दो तरह के होते हैं according to Victor Turner. One kind represents crucial power divisions and classificatory distinctions within and among socially and politically discrete groups like castes maybe, and the other represents ritual linkages between these groups. The first emphasizes exclusiveness while the second emphasizes inclusiveness. So I guess Varna system as opposed to Tantra, वैसा कुछ argument होगा. It is in cults of the second kind, Turner argues, that individual responsibility is extended from the domain of immediate kin and neighborhood relations in localized normative systems. Neighborhood relations in localized normative systems. To that of wider and more diffuse communities sharing common ideas and values. He refers to pilgrimages and the organization of pilgrimage centers in complex large-scale societies and historical religions, such as Hinduism, as examples of inclusive cults, and to localized religious activities focused on local shrines which are themselves part of bounded social fields as examples of exclusive cults. It is this inclusive cult center which has the potential to draw on a large catchment area and to transform itself eventually into a major pilgrimage site, which can submerge the affiliations of small communities to the purely local parochial cults and impart to them a sense of belonging to a wider socio-religious network encompassing what has been termed a cult region. Unlike the monumental temple instituted and supported by the regional kingdom from above, such cult centers become inclusive through a historical process, as people themselves define and organize their cult regions over time. So more decentralization. A thing to be proud of as Bengalis, I think. Cult regions may develop in a variety of ways, and we have a fascinating account of the evolution of the cult of Vithoba at Pandharpur in western Maharashtra from the 6th century AD to the present day. Pandharpur is an inclusive cult center par excellence. It presents the story of the successive layers of transformations of a local deity in a peripheral area. A process began through Brahmanical mediation but later reclaimed by the lower castes till its final incarnation as Vithoba, in which form it straddled many differences to emerge as a common cultural inheritance of the Maharashtrians. Pandharpur attracts pilgrims from almost all over Maharashtra, but scarcely from outside, which is the hallmark of an inclusive cult region. The parallels that Pandharpur offers to developments in Bengal are obvious, but the departures are no less conspicuous. While the importance of Vithoba rests primarily on its being at the center of a pilgrimage site, Bengal never produced a center of pilgrimage of comparable regional dimension. Why aren't they taking into account the Kali temple? Because it was much later in history. Ganga Sagara, the confluence of Ganga and the Bay of Bengal, is perhaps the only major pilgrimage site of early medieval Bengal, right? And it has been promoted systematically in the Bengal Puranas. But there is no firm evidence to suggest that it took off as a significant center of religious congregation before the early 19th century. Besides, the site remains deserted throughout the year except on the day of Paush Sankranti in the month of January, when a fair is organized in honor of Kapila, who is reputed to have been the founder of the Samkhya philosophy. But neither the river Ganga nor the sage Kapila invoke typically Bengali associations, and the pilgrims who come from all over the country, especially neighboring Bihar, to attend the fair and obtain piety far exceed the number of Bengali participants. The popularity of the Shakta Pithas, a few of which are mentioned in the Bengal Puranas, though these do not necessarily correspond to the sites now in worship, is also a late medieval phenomenon and is not unique to Bengal. The success of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement had resulted in the emergence of some sacred sites in the 16th-17th centuries, such as Navadvipa, the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Deva. But its religious appeal, which remained confined largely to southwestern Bengal, declined over the years, much to the blame of Vaishnavites themselves, as far as I have read in R.C. Majumdar's book, of course. Moreover, both the Shakta Pithas and the Vaishnava sites retained their essentially sectarian character and therefore cannot claim ubiquitous acceptability. The Bhakti movement itself, despite its professed egalitarianism, was initiated by a Brahmana in Bengal. The subsequent theological debates were conducted partly in Sanskrit, and even though it was fairly broad based and encouraged the development of vernacular literature, Bhakti in Bengal never assumed the aspects of an overwhelmingly low caste protest movement, as had happened in Pandharpur. Thus, Bengal cannot be described as a cult region in terms of a universally recognized pilgrimage site. However, I argue that Bengal does qualify to be considered as a cult region. Indeed, it was on the shared understanding of a variously represented common cult form that the earliest and still inarticulate foundation of Bengal's regional tradition was laid. In the absence of a central monitoring agency such as the Temple of Jagannatha or an inclusive pilgrimage site such as Pandharpur, the cult of the regional goddesses, conceived and promoted by the Bengal Puranas, helped to create a common focus and to integrate the highly stratified rural society in Bengal. The, the annual worship of Durga, also mentioned repeatedly in the Bengal Puranas, but not popularized before the late medieval period, now functions as the supreme signifier of Bengal's religious culture to the outsider, quote unquote outsider. However, in this essay, I have traced the evolution of Mangal Chandi in presence to Durga in order to. But Ma Durga has some association of with Vindhyavasini as well, right? I had seen in some speech by Bibek Dev Roy that Raghunandan Bhattacharya first, I think, started or encouraged the start of the Durga Puja, and it was kind of based on Devi Vindhyavasini, something of that sort. Yes, Ryuku, but they were not in the period we are discussing, hence they were much later. They were created much later. However, in this essay, I have traced the evolution of Mangal Chandi in preference to Durga in order to highlight the process by which the local goddesses were universalized within the cultural space of, in Derek Lodrick's words, an experienced region. And to show how the newly acquired syncretic identity of these goddesses in turn helped to reinforce the regional identity of Bengal. Anthropological studies reveal that there exists an unstated agreement among the various caste groups of rural Bengal, from the Brahmanas to the very lowly placed in the hierarchy, that the worship of these regional goddesses is a shared responsibility of the entire village community. The religious culture of Bengal is embedded in this larger system of social practice. The practice is kept going by a busy sacred calendar, which, in my opinion, has contributed more to the construction of the internal perspective than the spectacular annual worship of Durga. There are minor sub-regional variations in the procedures of worship or in the nature of caste participation, but a common orientation towards the regional goddesses makes Bengal a cult region, even though almost by default. Those local goddesses who, due to the absence of Brahmanical recognition, could not make it to the regional grade, continue to be an integral feature of the religious culture of Bengal. However, their exclusive character barred them from providing an active input into the growth of Bengal's regional consciousness. This argument seems a little big to me. Their exclusive character barred them from providing an active input into the growth of Bengal's regional consciousness. Bengal's regional consciousness grow होने में क्या बाकी रह गया था? नहीं हुआ क्या regional consciousness? Maybe not. बाहर के लोग तो वंगा वंगा करते ही थे. This doesn't seem very correct. This scenario is not unique to Bengal, but nowhere else did a set of texts play such a crucial role in the cultural transformation of a region. Brahmanism in Bengal, through the codification and transmission of the Puranas, succeeded in creating a public realm in which diverse local elements could converge on a common core through the mediation of a supralocal agency. Yes. A public realm in which diverse local elements could converge on a common core through the mediation of a supralocal agency. Does this sound like swallowing to anyone? And if not, why do I need to make up lies to substitute these facts? This common core had set the terms for a larger community consciousness. By community, I refer to a process of social interaction which gives rise to a more extensive attitude and practice of interdependence among its constituents. Community is often viewed as a structure of institutions capable of objective definition, but I have used the term in the sense of an internal perception of a cultural identity, the word community, a common way of thinking and behaving. So, an exclusive group with its own consumption patterns, if you will. According to this approach, community is an aggregative device in which commonality is not necessarily uniformity. That's the end of the paper, I guess, or no? It is a commonality of forms, ways of behaving, consumption patterns, and whose content or meanings may vary considerably among its members. The triumph of community, or therefore, it's not a caste. It's not not a random status group. You see, because वहाँ पे उतना डाइवर्सिटी अलाउड नहीं है, मीनिंग मेकिंग अलग मीनिंग मेकिंग अलाउड नहीं है, तो तुम उस एक्सक्लूसिव ग्रुप से बाहर चले जाओगे. This is different. This is community. The triumph of community is to so contain this variety that its inherent discordance does not subvert the apparent coherence which is expressed by its boundaries. Therefore, these are not castes. Thus, although the members of a community may recognize important differences among themselves and the meanings they attach to cultural symbols may also vary, they nevertheless share the symbols. ये क्या हिंदुत्व का बात हो रहा है यहाँ पे? Symbols are by definition multivalent and part of their meaning is subjective. But the common form of the symbol helps to aggregate the various meanings assigned to it, just as the symbolic repertoire of a community aggregates the individual and the group differences that exist within the community. Both the individual differences that exist within the community get aggregated, as well as the the group differences that exist within the community, they also get aggregated. The process of aggregation so transforms the differences into an appearance of similarity that people tend to invest the community with ideological integrity, Hindutva. This integrity derives from the self-definition of the community as bearers of the same culture. तो भाई हिंदुइज्म नहीं था बोलने से क्या फायदा? अब अगर हम इसको हिंदुइज्म घोषणा करते हैं तो वो हिंदुइज्म है. Hence, culture rather than structure is the point of departure in my understanding of community. In Bengal, Brahmanism performed the role of combining the small parochial communities with the dominant symbol of the regional goddess, which became one of the enduring features of its regional tradition. Brahmanical culture, in creative interplay with the diverse local cultures of Bengal, transformed itself into a regional Brahmanical culture, characterized by a range of common cultural denominators and a shared vocabulary of values that later proved to be typical of Bengal. Yes. In the process, Brahmanism helped local cultures to transcend their purely local boundaries. Brahmanism helped local cultures to transcend their purely local boundaries. भाई किसको लग रहा है ये लेफ्टिस्ट मार्क्सिस्ट प्रोपागेंडा है जिसके लिए ये ट्रूथ इग्नोर करके हमको कोई और सब्स्टिट्यूट झूठ बनाना है just for feeling nice in our hearts? Brahmanism helped local cultures to transcend their purely local boundaries and encouraged them to participate in and eventually to develop a sense of belonging to a larger cultural system. The system, this shows you how young India actually is. We are just getting started. We are such a young society. अभी हमारा यूनिफाई होना शुरू हुआ है properly. The system was flexible enough to continue to accommodate new elements and yet sufficiently firm to soften discord and maintain a commonality of forms. What a beautiful sentence to say from a leftist Marxist historian. In other words, Brahmanism was instrumental in creating a wider cultural community by extending the frontiers of recognition of the local cultures. This does not mean that the boundaries of local cultures were completely obliterated. Instead, the process of cultural transaction created an altered conception of cultural space, in which the region became another unit of identification. In the hierarchy of cultural units, the region stands halfway between the pan-Indian level, represented by Brahmanism and described by Hitesh Ranjan Shannal, a Marga, literally the path, and by implication classical, a Marga culture, and the local level, represented by ethnic groups and described by Hitesh Ranjan Shannal as Jono culture, Jana, literally people, and by implication, indigenous culture. So one Marg culture and one Jono culture. Jono Sanskriti, Marg Sanskriti. The interaction between these two levels resulted in the inauguration of a trend of cultural growth through elaboration and modification at both levels, which helped the local society to overcome the limitations inherent in it and allowed the new cultural pattern to assume a broader significance. New idioms emerged in the process of cultural growth. These idioms may be local in origin, but they cut across the boundaries of localized ethnic group identities and spread over a larger territory with common cultural characteristics and aspirations, that is to say, Desha, in the traditional sense of the term, as against its modern meaning of the nation state. The growth of the intermediate level of culture is an effective force in consolidating the concept of Desh as a cultural phenomenon, as also in defining the boundaries of the physical space covered by a Desh. Indeed, I am referring to a period when neither the national identity of India nor the provincial identity of Bengal as political administrative units had developed. Therefore, these nomenclatures are being applied only in retrospect. However, from the cultural imbroglio caused by the intervention of Brahmanism in the existing order of fragmented little communities, an inchoate idea of a cultural territory larger than the purely local, and consequently, the first imperfect awareness of a cultural community wider than those of parochial ethnic groups had begun to emerge. छोटे छोटे ट्राइब्स के जगह एक कल्चरल यूनिट, एक पूरा का पूरा बंगाल कैसे बना? बिकॉज ऑफ ब्राह्मणिज्म. Where are we learning of it? In a leftist journal. At least the Puranic testimony points to that direction, and the vernacular literature of the medieval period confirms this supposition. Surely the indigenous local cultures involved in this process of cultural transformation did not give up all their internal differences and become one homogeneous cultural community. Okay? The indigenous local cultures involved in this process of cultural transformation did not give up all their internal differences and become one homogeneous cultural community. ये देखो ब्रह्म कलशा सॉन्ग का पिक्चराइजेशन का ही ऑलमोस्ट डिस्क्रिप्शन दिया जा रहा है यहाँ पे. Not all of them comprehend the implications of the transformative process in exactly the same way, nor did they relate to the ideological underpinnings of the process or to the cultural objects created in the process with equal intensity. Needless to say, there were instances of imperfect integration and also of dissent. But to the extent that a large majority of them accepted the newly emerging cultural symbols in one way or another, a different order of cultural identity was established. आज से हम इनकी पूजा करेंगे. Cultural identities evolve over a period of time and are subject to continuous renewal and change. Cult regions are also created through historical transformations. I have looked merely at the beginning of this process. It is true that too much emphasis on the origin of cultural identity may exert a backward drag and make one oblivious to future developments. I nevertheless submit that the Puranic synthesis in Bengal should be considered seriously as the point of departure which generated for the first time that necessary cultural resource. What resource? What caused it? The Puranic synthesis in Bengal. Okay, it caused what? It caused the necessary cultural resource which enabled little communities to transform themselves into a regional community which could be culturally identified and territorially demarcated. End of the paper. Fantastic paper. Interesting history here. They got us saying Hitesh Ranjan Sannal nowhere said local versus Vedic deity narrative. I read him चुतियापा कर रहा है यहाँ पर. चुतियापा हो या नॉन चुतियापा हो है तो ट्रूथ ही. एक मिनट मैं फिर से पेपर खोलता हूँ. लेट मी चेक what was the exact argument about Hitesh Ranjan Sannal. Wait. वैदिक वर्सेस लोकल डेटी से इतना काहे तुम लोगों का गांड जलता है, ये आज तक मुझे समझ में नहीं आया. कहाँ से वैदिक डेटी पैरेलली काम्बोडिया में और हरियाणा में क्रिएट होगा? अच्छा, let's see what Hitesh Ranjan Sannal said according to this guy, according to the Chutia scholar. Hitesh Ranjan Sannal. Let me cast the screen as well. Why can't I share the PDF all of a sudden? इसको क्या हुआ? अभी तक तो शेयर ही कर रहा था. रुको, इसको देखते हैं. No, for some reason I'm not allowed to share out of the blue. Okay, let me check what Hitesh Ranjan Sannal said. Okay. Halfway between the pan-Indian level represented by Brahmanism and described by Hitesh Ranjan Sannal, a Marga culture, and the local level represented by ethnic groups and described by Sannal as Jana culture. So the Marga culture, according to Dipankar Chakrabarti, implies classical culture, meaning Vedic culture, and the Jono culture is the indigenous pre-Vedic culture. And you are saying Hitesh Ranjan Sannal did not say it. So according to you, what did Marga culture and Jana culture, according to Hitesh Ranjan Sannal, meant? What did he imply? It evolved into local deity, not cultural digestion, as he is trying to say. What is the difference between the two sentences you just said? Okay. What a great paper. Thanks to Academic Man for sending this. This was a great discussion. I learned a lot. A lot of my views got a lot of my views about Kantara chapter 1 got validated. Now, if this scholar is completely wrong, then of course Kantara chapter 1 is leftist propaganda. इसी टाइप के नैरेटिव फॉलो करके मणिपुर क्रिश्चियनाइज किया गया है. तो क्रिश्चियनाइज अपोज करने के लिए अगर हमको गांडू बनना है तो भाई ठीक है, झूठ फैलाओ, सत्य बोलोगे तो गांडू लोग कन्वर्ट कर जाएंगे. नेहरू ने जाने दिया सिर्फ मिशनरीज को, किसी और को जाने नहीं दिया, वो फैक्टर नहीं है. सत्य बोल दिया इसलिए क्रिश्चियनाइज हो गए. This is Bengali identity cannot be divided. My problem is that there is an underlying assumption that the first integrating coexistence force was the Vedic Brahmins, but that doesn't explain the existence of Devi statues in Harappa pre-Vedic. Why? Barbara, first of all, Harappa statues, how much they are Hindu and not Hindu, that debate is not settled. I believe they are a part of Hinduism only. But what is your problem exactly? Let's see. So the Vedic Brahmins, you are saying that Harappa was also pre-Vedic. Was it really pre-Vedic? Harappa, it disintegrated in 4,500 years from now, right? And Rig Veda is approximately 5,000, 6,000 years old. So if the Rig Veda was there in Harappa, Afghanistan, and Harappa was pre-Vedic and it disintegrated right around that time. So who spoke to whom and who integrated with whom? I'm still not seeing a problem with what we are learning here in the paper. Some of the stuff is a bit too much. Bit too much, nahi. Facts are facts. Choice of words and connotation and tone is sometimes problematic. I will admit that. पंधरपुर में कास्ट रेबेलियन हुआ नामदेव के समय से ही. This region was invested in bhakti movement, and if that is seen as a low caste rebellion to the author, then nothing more to say. Okay, this author knows nothing. This scholar knows nothing. There are three phases of the Harappan civilization: pre-Harappan, middle Harappan, and later Harappan. Right. Okay then. Thanks a lot for joining, guys. We'll carry on this debate some other time. Academic Man will join us for the Kantara Chapter 1 review discussion as well, which will be simultaneously live streamed on Navavimarsh as well as this channel. उसके बाद हम कोशिश करेंगे थोड़ा टाइम रखने का for this debate as well, whether Kantara Chapter 1 is leftist propaganda or not. See you guys soon, guys. Bye bye.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো